In the past 1,000 years, I haven't heard of anyone using medicinal fertilizers to forcefully raise bound black spirit plants. I even thought that these cruel methods had become extinct. I didn't expect that I would see it here. He wrinkled her eyebrows, and just as she was about to speak, she heard a feeble voice behind her. Begging. Begging you. Kill me. Begging you. Kill me. She suddenly turned her head and saw a young lady that hadn't even reached 20 years old laying on the stone bed in the opposite room. The girl was entirely naked and her dried up and messy hair was scattered on the stone bed. Blue-black mushroom plants grew all over her body, turning her originally bright and clean flesh into soil for these mushrooms. Her body had been suffused with a rotten and stinky smell. And these mushrooms had taken root deeply inside her body. Some were mixed alongside her internal organs and dantian, others were bound to her skeleton. Slowly, were consuming her life force. She extended her hand, wanting to probe this young woman in order to further investigate her circumstances, but the little golden dragon blocked her. Lauda, don't waste your strength. These people are no longer able to be saved. The little golden dragon sighed and with a heavy voice, he said, the seeds of these bound black spirit plants were all directly planted in this people. Afterward, with the help of these martial artists' nourishment, they slowly began to germinate. Once these plants sprout, their life breath and the spirit plants merge together, becoming one. Their heart and soul will all be replaced by the roots of these plants. This is also why they can still breathe even though the spirit plants have blocked up their mouth and nose. So, Lauda, even if you destroyed these spirit plants, these people would be unable to continue living. And if you don't eliminate these spirit plants, their life force will slowly be absorbed by these spirit plants until ultimately, they also die. Having talked up to here, the little golden dragon's face had a sympathetic expression on it. These medicinal fertilizers are already equal to a dead person. How long will it take for them to lose their life force? The only question is merely a matter of time. Furthermore, if they die because the bound black spirit plants absorbed all their life force, their mind will be entirely wiped out, so much so that they wouldn't have a chance to reincarnate. AI. Lauda, you killing them would be the best ending for them. After hearing the little golden dragon's words, she sunk into silence. And the young lady once again extended her hand towards He, stammering, begging you. Kill us, rather than live this way. It would be better to let me die. Release. The light in He's eyes slowly condensed and became calm. The purple vine in her hands slowly swayed around. She turned to stare at this young lady in the eyes and solemnly nodded. Okay, I'll agree with your request. Just as she finished speaking, the purple vine suddenly sent out a light golden flame. When the vine extended forwards, the light golden flame touched the spirit plants on the young lady. Those bound black spirit plants violently began to shake, seeming as if they were afraid and wanted to run away. But, the light golden flame was incomparably strong. In practically the blink of an eye, it seemed to have swallowed the young lady and the blue-black plants inside itself. The light golden flame enveloped the young lady's body. Soon, it seemed that she would die a violent death. But the young lady's face let out a gratified smile, with sparkling eyes. She looked towards He and softly said, "Thank you." Moments later, the young lady on the stone bed had been burnt into bones and the bound black plants disappeared without a trace. But He didn't stop moving. The purple vine flew out of her body. Bringing the light golden flame, it scattered it around the entire basement. Wherever the golden flame went, nothing escaped being burned. Everything turned into ashes. To the side, the little golden dragon loudly clapped his hands. Lauda is mighty, destroy all these harmful items. In the time it took to burn a stick of incense, the several hundred bound black spirit plants this underground laboratory had been cultivating for several hundred years was completely destroyed by He. She collected all the corpses and using a storage ring, she stored all the skeletons inside. When this whole situation was over, she was going to bury them outside. These people had no way to live a good life, so she hoped they would be able to rest in peace after death. After completely destroying the underground laboratory, Hashi brought the little golden dragon along the former road, heading back. This one time, she didn't intend to conceal her figure. Since Xiaoli had already been saved, her only goal now was to make these brutes pay their debt in blood. Once the patrolling martial artists in the backyard saw Hashi, they all rushed forward to surround her. Moreover, all these martial artists were at high-rank foundation establishment stage and all their clothes was the same. Between advance and retreat, they became each other's corners, closing off all ways of escape. It was clear they were well-trained and cooperative. The 30-year-old tall man leading them pointed at Hashi, strictly yelling, "Where did this rude youngster come from, daring to enter my Jiang family's restricted area?" As he was talking, he was also pointing the gun in his hand at Hashi. His body exploded with fierceness. Hashi slowly raised her eyebrow and repeated one sentence, "Jiang family?" Before coming to other courtyard, she always believed that this whole matter was orchestrated by Dr. Xie. But the two martial artists who were just skinned inside the basement had kept saying that it was Elder Jiang who let them do it. Now this guard also said, this was Jiang family's other courtyard. In other words, Dr. Xie was related to these matters, but he wasn't the mastermind. There was still someone behind him. Moreover, it was this person being called Elder Jiang. When the group of guards saw Hashi's reaction, they immediately burst into loud laughter. One of the people inside the group even said towards the lead martial artist, "Captain, there's no need to ask anymore. It's certain he's a lost little cash cow that, by chance, doesn't have eyes and was delivered to our door. However, since this is the case and he delivered himself to our door, we should accept him. It just happens to be that a few days before, didn't Elder Jiang also said that there wasn't enough medicinal fertilizers to use? Look at this youngster, such soft and tender flesh, abundant spiritual energy. And even though he is only at foundation establishment stage, he escaped our eyes and ears and entered other courtyard. It can be assumed he has some sort of capability. As I see it, he is just right to be a medicinal fertilizer." This group of guards encircling Hashi accessed from head to toe. Apparently, they didn't put her in their eyes at all. Hashi actually let out an eerie smile. Medicinal fertilizer? Are you talking about those martial artists underground that are used to raise bound black spirit plants? What? When the captain of the guards heard what she said, his complexion immediately changed. You went to the basement? How is this possible? Another guard cried out in fear, the basement is guarded by a mysterious iron door that's 100 gene. Even a nascent soul stage martial artist wouldn't be able to force it open without the help of a magic weapon. Hashi lightly fiddled with the purple abyss vine in her hands, unhurriedly saying, not only have I been to it, I also completely burned those unsightly black plants. Therefore, even if you guys find countless more medicinal fertilizers, I'm afraid it's useless. When everyone heard what she said, their facial expressions became bewildered. Just at this moment, she heard the alarmed cry of another group of patrolling guards from behind her. The basement. The basement is on fire. The fire spread up to here. In addition, it's spiritual fire. Simply can't extinguish it. In the blink of an eye, the bewilderment in the faces of these several people completely changed into alarm and astonishment. The captain of the guards made a prompt decision, saying to the guard next to him, you, quickly go notify Elder Jiang. You others people follow me up, get this reckless youth captured for me. Really has eaten a leopard's guts, actually daring to come to my Jiang family's territory and behave so atrociously. Today, Grandpa will let you know how you will die. Exactly, this youngster is merely at foundation establishment stage. Don't tell me he's able to resist all of our attacks. Everyone, follow me up. But without waiting for these guards to move, Hashi faintly laughed. It doesn't matter if you come up together, but none of you can think of running. Right after she said that, purple vines instantly launched out of Hashi's body. The person who suffered the most was precisely the guard who ran out to notify Elder Jiang. The purple vine neatly penetrated the guards' bodies. In the blink of an eye, it sucked in all of the flesh on his body. The group of martial artists witnessing this scene were scared so much their two eyes turned blank. Some of the cowardly ones' butts fell onto the ground. With great difficulty, the captain of the guards held onto the long gun in his hands and forced himself to stop shaking, loudly saying, "You. In the end, who are you? Do you know where our Jiang family is?" Heshi's eyes were serene and large, they didn't contain a trace of human emotion in them. Her mouth lifted into a brilliant smile. It added to her beautiful appearance, making her seem prettier, like moonlight. "You're asking who I am?" She slowly asked, even going as far as to carry a somewhat tender intonation, saying, "I am the death god that will bring you guys to hell." Her words had barely sounded out when the purple vine that had already flew out and was suspended in the air acted as if it had received an order. Without stopping, it advanced towards several people. All one heard was, "Ka-ca," and in an instant, these several martial artists' necks had been twisted and the vine had sucked up all their flesh. But there were a few martial artists who escaped the purple vine's first attack and let out mournful calls for help. Heshi's face didn't show the slightest bit of panic, so much so that she was still filled with interest and jumped on top of a fake mountain. While sitting on the fake mountain, she swung her legs back and forth. If there wasn't the shadow of the purple vine flashing about by her side, people from far away would have believed they were looking at a snow-white and jade-skinned, delicate and elegant, innocent and pure little youth. In the blink of an eye, this entire team of martial artists had been completely massacred by the purple abyss vine. The purple abyss vine noiselessly returned to Heshi's hand, its purple leaves intimately rubbed against the white, jade-like wrist. And at this time, the other martial artists inside other courtyard heard this group of martial artists' miserable shouting. Soon, there was many martial artists quickly making their way over here. There were clearly quite a few people here that had a high level of strength. A large part of them were at the summit of Foundation establishment stage, but there were also quite a few martial artists who were at Meridian stage. When this group of people arrived at the scene of the murder, they were startled by all the skeletons in front of their eyes. What exactly is going on? They heard the screams and rushed here, but what they saw wasn't a fighting scene, instead it was a floor filled with bones of the dead. Suddenly, someone pointed at one of the skeletons among the corpses, crying out in fear, "Lauda, this is Sun Gang's butterfly sword." Sun Gang, it was precisely the captain of the guards from before. And at this moment, as this group of people looked on, they also discovered that the clothes these corpses were wearing were those of guards from other courtyard. The middle-aged man that brought the group over suddenly reacted, his pair of eagle-like eyes looked straight at Heshi, who was sitting on top of the fake mountain. "Who is your distinguished self? Coming to my Jiang manor to cause trouble, don't tell me you're impatient of living." Heshi's hand supported herself on the fake mountain. Her head was tilted to the side, showing her elegant complexion and graceful, snow-white neck. She slowly said, "I'm not impatient of living, but when looking at this group of unreputable people, I feel impatient. Therefore, the only option I'm left with is to send you guys off to hell, so as to avoid hindering my sight." Presumptuous. Having heard what was said, the middle-aged man was seething with anger. Pointing at Heshi, he shouted, "What do you count as, actually daring to come to my Jiang manor and say such nonsense? And you even dare to slaughter my Jiang manor's guards, you really think my Jiang family doesn't have anyone? Come, follow me up. I want to see this Foundation establishment stage waiter who acts so savage with a dog's courage in my Jiang manor." His words were furious, but the middle-aged man's hand didn't stop either. He quickly took out a cold, deep green long sword. The middle-aged man poured his spiritual energy into it, causing the sword to whiz as he swiftly flew towards Heshi, who was sitting on the fake mountain. At the same time, those Meridian stage martial artists who followed behind the middle-aged man also took out their magical flying swords and waited for action. Soon, the green long sword already began striking in front of Heshi. The purple vines wrapped around her slender arms suddenly swept out, one after another. All that was heard was, "Pa," and in the blink of an eye, flames erupted all around everyone. That green long sword was stopped mid-air by the purple vine, and without waiting for the middle-aged man to respond, it suddenly turned around and facing the group of people, it flew towards them. Ah ah! One of the people in the group of guards let out a woeful howl as the green long sword pierced through his chest. He slowly bowed his head to look at the long sword in his stomach, his eyes were filled with disbelief and astonishment. Soon after, his head became askew as he stopped breathing. She held on to the purple abyss vine as she stood on top of the fake mountain. Her silky, satin-like hair danced around in the wind alongside the purple abyss vine, who was swaying about in her hands. The youth's beautiful face showed a serene smile, seeming to be someone who came out of a painting. But at this moment, she looked as if she was Yama who would seize lives, causing people to feel terror. The middle-aged man's look became even more unsightly. The flying sword that was inside the person's stomach hummed several more times before returning back to his hands. He originally thought that this was merely a foundation establishment stage martial artist. Even if the magic weapon in their hands was more powerful and they could skillfully and easily wipe out a group of foundation establishment stage guards. But when they ran into his own group of Meridian stage martial artists, they wouldn't be able to do devastation as they wished. But it was very clear, the fact was that his imaginations and reality were extremely far apart. In the end, who are you? Fear rose in the middle-aged man's heart and he couldn't help but raise his voice and ask. But before he could finish speaking, she suddenly flew into the air and the purple vine in her hands whistled as it came out. All that was heard was a loud pang as the purple vine rolled up 10 or so foundation establishment stage martial artists. Soon after, they were ruthlessly flung into a wall. It was a pity, these foundation establishment stage martial artists weren't at a high rank, so when the purple abyss vine rolled them up, their spiritual energy defense was also eliminated. Without their spiritual energy defense, they became ordinary people. To be flung so ruthlessly against the wall, they didn't even groan before all their bones were shattered as they cleanly died. At this moment, the middle-aged man's facial expression was very alarmed, he was just about to call for everyone to go up together. When suddenly, there was the sound of someone clapping behind him. Soon after, an old man wearing a smiling expression slowly said, "Good skill, good magic weapon." Sure enough, the hero is a young man, ah. It's hard to believe that genius doctor is so young. Not only do you have exceptional medical skills, unexpectedly, your cultivation stage is also so excellent. Really makes our group of old men not want to admit to our old age. His words had just been said when Heshi saw the group of guards who were originally surrounding her, including the middle-aged man, all let out revering expressions. One by one, these several people all stepped aside, creating a road. At the end of the road, several tall, male silhouettes walked over. All she saw was a male wearing a gray cloth gown with a long beard. His eyes were fixed on Heshi, they were filled with jealousy and bitter resentment. But it wasn't Dr. Xia, who was it? There was a 50 or 60-year-old man walking in front of Dr. Xia. His hair and beard was already grizzled and his face had even more pronounced wrinkles. This old man was clearly many years older than Dr. Xia, but the brightness in his eyes was hidden, and from head to toe, the movement of his spiritual energy didn't even leak out a tiny bit, this was clearly an expert. And seeing Dr. Xia's respectfulness when standing behind him, it explained that this person was other courtyard's master and was also most likely the Elder Jiang these people kept mentioning. And behind Elder Jiang and Dr. Xia, there were also 2 robust males following behind them. Their entire body was filled with muscles and looking at their cultivation, they had clearly already reached the summit of Meridian stage, far surpassing the guards in this courtyard by quite a bit. She only used her own special ability to examine and could clearly see that this Elder Jiang's cultivation was already at the middle of Gold Core stage. With Heshi's current cultivation stage, any martial artists under Gold Core stage didn't have any importance to her. But if she opposed someone at Gold Core stage, especially someone at the middle of Gold Core stage, the outcome was unknown. Dr. Xia looked towards Heshi, the cold light in his eyes turned around before he chuckled. Elder Jiang, this is the person this subordinate spoke to you about on that day, genius Dr. Shi. Saying this, he looked towards Heshi and insincerely smiled. Genius Dr. Shi, you're wrong. We left a slip of paper at your house with good intentions and thoughts, inviting you over to be an honorable guest. Even if you weren't grateful, how can you sneakily infiltrate our other courtyard and even harm the guards here? Dr. Xia didn't get to finish speaking when Elder Jiang stopped him, insincerely saying, how do you speak Chongming, genius Dr. Xia is the honorable guest we expected. No matter how she came, we still welcome her. Saying this, he beamed at Heshi. His expression and tone as he spoke was full of benevolence without the slightest hint of malice. We're honored by your presence, genius Dr. Xie. Your presence really brings light to my humble other courtyard, ah. The people under my hand didn't recognize genius Dr. Xie and upset your distinguished self, please don't take offense. Heshi's face also held a mild smile. Her exquisite 5 organs were faintly shone on by the candlelight in the dark night. Occasionally she looked innocent and from time to time she looked demonic. The guards here didn't recognize me, so they acted out. Then the people in my B courtyard, they clearly knew, but they still acted out. Elder Jiang was startled, looking at the youth in front of him. He became absent-minded for a moment. He had heard Dr. Xia say before, the genius doctor, was able to repair fractured bones and mend arteries and veins, was a young man. He now saw with his own eyes and shockingly found that this youth's age was so young, had such a fragile figure, and elegant appearance. He clearly had the pretty complexion of a young lady, but his 2 eyes were piercing and frigid, as if one would shiver from just looking because of fright and coldness. Naturally, this feeling only lasted for a split second. After all, Elder Jiang was already a gold core expert. He quickly returned back to reality and quietly raised his spiritual energy to oppose this youth's imposing oppression. The expression on his face was still the benevolent old man expression as he smiled. It was merely a giant misunderstanding, that's all. Genius Dr. Shi, there's no need to fuss over such minor matters. Lao Fu merely heard of genius Dr. Shi's exceptional medical skills, so Lao Fu wanted to invite genius Dr. Shi over to compare medical notes with you, a mutual exchange of assistance. Heshi said, oh, her intonation was an unable to be said carelessness, compare medical notes? Just in order to call me over to compare medical notes, you find people to kill, burn, and abduct people? Elder Jiang, this way of comparing medical notes is really new, really unusual. Ah. Why don't I come to give you some advice? Elder Jiang's eyebrows raised as he chuckled, oh. There's also this type of matter. Having said this, he seemingly turned around to blame Dr. Xia, who was standing behind him. Chongming, what did you do? Didn't I tell you to go invite genius Dr. Xia? How can you touch as you wish? Dr. Xia's eyes changed. How could he not understand his master's meaning? At once, he looked at Heshi with a face filled with remorse. Genius Dr. Shi, somewhat misunderstood. Originally, we respectfully came to request for you. Who would have thought that the subordinates at your manor were unable to differentiate good from bad? Without distinguishing between right and wrong, they regarded us as bad people. My subordinates were helpless and could only resist. Who would have imagined that when we resisted, they didn't grasp appropriate behavior? Bringing Xiao Li Gunyang was also in order to get genius Dr. Shi to come. We really wish for you to properly apologize. As for those youngsters that didn't know propriety and offended genius Dr. Shi, I already firmly taught them a lesson. Wishing genius Dr. Shi is big and generous, don't bother about them. These words that Dr. Xia spoke were both gentle and forceful, with a degree of propriety. When Elder Jiang heard them, he was immensely pleased. He couldn't help but stroke his beard and smile. If genius Dr. Shi is still dissatisfied, it wouldn't be a bother for me to completely kill those several subordinates in order to help you vent your anger. But if I was to say it, your B courtyard, the people that died were merely just several slaves, nothing more. Dragging them over to sell at the market wouldn't earn you more than a few coins. Genius Dr. Xia, if you feel that you have suffered a loss, I will pay you back 10 times the amount. Correct, nothing more than a few insignificant subordinates. They're only worth a few coins. He slightly evoked the corners of her mouth, her voice was gloomy and slow. What Elder Jiang said is correct. Having heard what was said, a thread of happiness flashed through Elder Jiang's mind and at once, he said, since Genius Dr. Shi is so fair and reasonable, it would be better to follow me. But, he didn't get to finish speaking when he suddenly saw a purple vine fly out from Heshi's wrist. Like lightning, the purple vine divided into 10 in the air and facing all directions it went out. In the blink of an eye, it penetrated 10 guards' chests. Before they could even come back to reality, it ended their lives. 10 purple vines floated around in the air, resembling a purple barrier. It also emitted a pungent bloody smell. Dr. Xia's face became extremely ugly and he sternly pointed at Heshi. Shiyu, don't be shameless. We had good intentions and treated you with respect, yet you have the impertinence to raise your hand when Elder Jiang was speaking. Are you impatient of living? The smiling expression on Heshi's face slightly changed, her finger lightly caressed the purple abyss vine as she sneered at him. What? Didn't you say, it's merely a few insignificant subordinates, nothing more. Not worth any coins. Why are you angry now? Minor matters, be what? You literally slaughtered everyone in her courtyard. If you guys wish, I can go to the marketplace to buy a dozen more and compensate you guys. These words, didn't Elder Jiang just moments ago say them with his own mouth? At this moment, Elder Jiang's benevolent expression finally had a small crack. His expression when looking at Heshi became colder and gloomier. Dr. Xia knew that Elder Jiang had moved to the point of wanting to kill. His heart was carefree as he coldly looked towards Heshi, mockingly saying, having been called Genius Dr. Shi, you really think you're a genius doctor? I'm telling you, it's best if you don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Today, if you obediently surrender and pay allegiance to my Jiang manner, we'll forget about this. If you dare to resist, your subordinate's end will be your end. At this moment, Elder Jiang's voice also turned frosty. Merely a few insignificant subordinates, if they died, then they died. It counts as an offer of apology for my subordinates offended Genius Dr. Shi. But Genius Dr. Shi, clearly understand your situation. Offending my Jiang family wouldn't serve any benefit for you. Having heard what was said, Heshi lowly began to laugh, which slowly changed to arrogant laughter. Oh, I seem to have forgotten to tell you. Just a moment ago, I already visited your Jiang family's laboratory, and found your hostages inside. Seeing as you guys were so enthusiastic and hospitable to my Shaoli, I also gave Elder Jiang a very small gift. By this time, Elder Jiang and Dr. Xia's faces greatly changed. Dr. Xia involuntarily yelled out, You visited the underground room? What did you do in there? Heshi lifted her eyes up, under her long eyelashes was a pair of glorious and starry eyes, however they contained a cold light. Didn't do anything, ah. It's nothing more than a fire, that completely burning all the things inside. Including those alive but inferior to death medicinal fertilizers, and also all the bound black spirit plants. Unexpectedly you burned all our spirit plants. Dr. Xia loudly roared. Because he was extremely angry and distressed, his face warped. Do you know how much heart's blood we spent, how many generations we had accumulated in order to be able to raise those bound black spirit plants? Elder Jiang was also angered until his face turned blue. The gaze he looked at Heshi with no longer contained any fake good-naturedness, all that was left was cold-heartedness. Shiyu, do you really think that this Lao Fu wants your replenishing arteries and veins extinct skill and will just ask for it from your mouth? As long as you're captured and we use a searching soul method on you, you will no longer be able to keep your secret. And unable to tell good from bad, yellow-mouthed child, too, Lao Fu wants you to regret your conduct today. Elder Jiang didn't get to finish speaking when he saw a purple shadow flying towards him. Indeed, this was Heshi directly mounting a sneak attack. Elder Jiang coldly snorted and disdainfully said, nothing more than an insignificant foundation establishment stage martial artist, yet wants to sneak attack Lao Fu. Simply overestimating one's capabilities. Finished speaking, he didn't even take out a magic weapon. His large, elegant gown suddenly waved. All one heard was, "Pa," and he had ruthlessly threw out the purple vine that was heading towards him. The strength Elder Jiang used to throw was enormous, the purple vine was thrown very far away and one after another, they all hit a wall. Even the wall had a small spider web-like crack in it. Elder Jiang felt very proud of himself in his heart, but he suddenly heard Dr. Xie's alarmed shout, "Elder Jiang, save me." His face greatly changed, turning his head, he witnessed Dr. Xie who already had 3 or 4 purple vines twisting around him, hoisting him high up in the air and flying in Heshi's direction. This youngster, the purple vines just then were simply part of the plan to create a diversion. One involuntarily yelled out, he lost control of how loud his voice was. 2 Yellow-mouthed child, something used to call satirical, ignorant children birthday update, 3/4, nearly there. Fun fact about myself, in my home, I actually speak Cantonese, not Mandarin. The actual person she wanted to attack was Xie Chongming. He saw that Dr. Xie was right in front of Heshi and Heshi had already picked up a long sword infused with cold light. Elder Jiang's complexion became extremely unsightly, with a loud roar, he threw himself over. "You dare!" But before he fell down, he heard shwa 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 sounds. Immediately following that, Dr. Xie let out a mournful howl. His entire body resembled a drum, dropping on the floor with a thump, he incessantly rolled around. Yes, exactly like a drum. Because the current Dr. Xie had already had his 4 limbs chopped off by the identical vines, all that was left over was a head attached to an upper body. His arms and legs were laid to the side, on the floor. His fingers had already begun to turn blue, but they were still moving around neurotically. Heshi slowly walked up to Dr. Xie, who was ceaselessly shouting, she smiled innocently and softly. "Dr. Xie, when you let people kill wet Nurse Chen and take out her internal organs, were you happy?" "Oh, I think you were definitely happy." She let out a light sigh, "Therefore, I don't mind letting you feel even happier." The words had just come out when the long sword in her hand flew out like a phantom, heading towards Dr. Xie's face to say hello. Dr. Xie's eyes resembled death, they were full of alarm and despair. Shortly, he no longer had eyes. His face didn't have a nose, ears, eyebrows, and eyes anymore. He still had a mouth, but his mouth no longer had a tongue, he couldn't make any noises. But it didn't matter, he still had his ears, he could still hear sounds. He also had his consciousness, the current pain on his body tortured him to the point of hovering between life and death. Heshi regained the long sword, but she didn't bother to wipe the bloodstain on it. Rather, she directly threw the long sword away. At last, she finally looked upon Dr. Xie. Her voice was soft and she had a tender expression as she said, "Although you killed wet Nurse Chen and tortured Shaoli, I've still decided that you can't die too easily. Now, you are unable to see, talk, walk, or do anything. But with a martial artist's valiant body, you won't die so easily either. You can't even kill yourself. You will suffer this hellish torture every day and every night for a long time, incapable of freeing yourself or escape. I trust that you'll feel extremely happy about this feeling." On the floor, Dr. Xie, who couldn't even be said to have a body anymore, frantically trembled. He twisted and turned, but nobody spared him a glance anymore and nobody cared about his life or death anymore. To Heshi, he was already a dead man. Wet Nurse Chen's hatred has already been revenged. To Elder Jiang, Xie Chongming having lost both his hands and feet and being unable to look or see, had already lost all his value. He was no longer worthy of paying any attention to. It was just that everyone turned speechless for half a day after seeing Heshi's ruthless methods. Clearly they're nothing more than 16 or 17 years old, didn't expect that when he cut off someone's forelimbs and removed their eyes, ears, mouth, and nose, his expression still wouldn't have the slightest change. No, his face still carried a breathtaking smile. This youth really is too terrifying. Even Elder Jiang had these thoughts. He originally wanted to attract him to his side, but he retrieved these thoughts. A thread of fear rose in his heart. If this youngster was allowed to mature, perhaps even he wouldn't be his match. So, after he obtained the extinct skill of replenishing arteries and veins, he must completely destroy this youth. Thinking up to here, Elder Jiang took a deep breath. His cold gaze looked towards He as he slowly said, "Looks like you won't choose to surrender and pay allegiance to my Jiang family?" He held on to the purple abyss vine again and lightly laughed. "Old fart, I dare to surrender and pay allegiance, do you dare to receive it? Just based on some Luosi Jiang family, you want me to surrender and pay allegiance? Don't dream too big. In this world, the people who can make me obedient and surrender haven't been born yet." The fury in Elder Jiang's eyes flashed as he coldly said, "Good, very good. Nothing more than an insignificant foundation establishment stage, and one's way of speaking really isn't small. Originally I still wanted to give you face, but seeing as you're unable to tell good from bad, I won't stand on ceremony." 1. When he finished speaking, a cyan flag suddenly appeared in his hand. This flag's appearance resembled the black flag Feng Yunjing carried inside the white fog, but it to be a lot less imposing when compared to that black flag. When the cyan flag appeared in Elder Jiang's hand, it was only the size of his palm, but when spiritual energy was poured in, it suddenly grew in size. Elder Jiang lowly roared, "Thousand Wind Blade." The cyan flag flew up and suddenly swirled up into a tornado, completely encircling He. Once she was trapped inside the tornado, He felt an immense pressure. This tornado was actually formed with countless wind blades, and every wind blade had the spiritual pressure and attack force of a gold core stage martial artist. Inside the hurricane, He had no way to move, she could only passively defend. Under these straitened circumstances, her body quickly developed numerous bruises of all shapes and sizes. And, this was under the purple abyss vine protecting her at full force, if not, she wouldn't have merely received bruises. Seeing He's sorry figure inside the tornado, Elder Jiang couldn't help but sneer at her. "How are things? Do you know the distance between foundation establishment stage and gold core stage now? Did you really think you could strut around just because you had a little bit of skill? Today you will learn that there are mountains beyond mountains, people beyond people, too." While saying this, Elder Jiang's hands raised and a large concentration of spiritual energy poured into the cyan flag. Quickly, the wind blades surrounding He picked up their speed by a few degrees. Although He didn't receive any serious injuries, the purple abyss vine was cut everywhere because it was protecting her. Occasionally, purple plant juice would drip down. He's heart gradually became anxious, and in her consciousness, she chid at the purple abyss vine. She wanted it to first protect itself, not to use its own spiritual energy to protect herself. But for the first time, the purple abyss vine was determined to resist against her command. No matter how badly it got cut up by the wind blades, it continued to protect He. Even if its vines were breaking off, root by root. It didn't consent to allowing her receive any mortal injuries. Elder Jiang laughed out loud. "Don't struggle, this pure wind flag, when paired with the thousand wind blade, is actually my unique skill. As long as you're trapped inside, even high-level gold core stage martial artists wouldn't be able to even think about coming out. You're merely an insignificant foundation establishment stage youngster. Do you really think you can rely on some magical plant, with unknown origins, and be able to get out of the thousand wind blade? Don't dream anymore. I advise you to hand over the replenishing arteries and veins extinct method now, this way I may still give you a way out. If you continue refusing to listen to reason, I can also beat you into a useless person and take out the things I want from your brain. By then, you better not regret. 1. Stand on ceremony, he won't be nice anymore. 2. Mountains beyond mountains, people beyond people, there's always someone more talented. The information obtained from the soul-searching technique was guaranteed to be true, but there was a 90% chance it would be damaged. But unless it was absolutely essential, Elder Jiang didn't want to use this method. Elder Jiang was howling with laughter, his heart was content. But he suddenly heard a loud sound, peng. The hurricane originally spinning around Heshi suddenly, violently began to shake. Soon after, a crack even appeared. A childlike voice carrying some mischievousness started laughing, "Smelly old man, this tornado can't be broken from the inside, but it can be from the outside, easily." The voice just came out when Heshi came out of the crack, with a body full of wounds, carrying a purple abyss vine riddled with scars. Following Heshi leaving, the 1,000 wind blades that made up the tornado quickly disappeared into thin air. And a blood-covered small dragon hung by Heshi's side. Facing Heshi, it mischievously laughed, "Lauda, I already tidied up that other group." Hi. I didn't pull your back leg." The light in Heshi's eyes dimmed a bit as she crouched down to carry the little golden dragon. It didn't know when her hand had so much medicinal powder, but she lightly spread it on the fierce wounds on its flesh, softly saying, "Didn't I tell you to run when there was danger?" The medicinal powder was spread across its body, causing the little golden dragon's aching body to tremble. But in spite of this, it still willfully laughed. "Lauda, you're so brave and fierce. I am your Xiao Di, how can? Cuckoo. How can I run away? Isn't that losing your, Lauda's, face? He, no matter what, it's Ben Zun. Because I was undaunted by the danger, I was able to damage that trash tornado. Lauda, you owe me a favor, ah." "Got it." Heshi used gauze to wrap up its wounds before softly saying, "Obediently enter my space, and when Lauda to teaches a lesson to these bad people, I'll make delicious food for you." The little golden dragon's eyes brightened. Rubbing against Heshi's wrist, he didn't hesitate to go back inside her space. Elder Jiang's complexion became grave and avaricious. The way he looked at Heshi seemed as if he was looking at a monster, "Didn't expect that you not only had a 9-tailed spirit fox, but you also had a golden dragon." If I can obtain the golden dragon, 9-tailed spirit fox, and the replenishing arteries and veins extinct method, don't even talk about joining the Doctor Association. Even if it was returning to my family, it would be an easy feat. How could an ordinary person think that an insignificant foundation establishment stage martial artist would have so many treasures on their body? Ha, my being able to capture you today is extremely lucky." When he finished speaking, the cool breeze flag was once again taken out. Rising into the air, it also simultaneously picked up dust. At the same time, Elder Jiang also flew up in the air. Arrogantly looking at Heshi, he disdainfully said, "You thought that just because you escaped the 1,000 wind blade once, you would be able to escape from my hands. If I can activate the 1,000 wind blade the first time, I can activate it a second time. Moreover, this time's 1,000 wind blade will be even stronger than last time's." After a moment, hula was heard and the cool breeze flag began to violently shake, swirling up an immense sandstorm. This time, it won't only be dust and tree leaves. Even the tiles and bricks on the house will be picked up into the hurricane. So much so that even the hill shook and swayed. Heshi's complexion was grave and a blue and red long sword appeared in her hand. She got this sword from Sealed Dragon Domain's secret territory. It was the sword that fit her the most now, Li Shui sword. It had both the water attribute and fire attribute. But before Heshi could move the sword, the purple abyss vine in her hand seemed to have not listened to her command and abruptly rose up into the air. 1. Xiao Di, younger brother. Little Purple. Heshi let out a cry of surprise. With all her might she prayed to the gods, wanting to bring Little Purple back. But, the purple vine seemed determined, completely ignoring Heshi's order. It knocked against the cyan flag, releasing the hurricane. The only sound was peng peng peng, repeatedly, loudly, sounding out. Under Heshi's alarmed gaze, she saw the thick purple vine fly high up then come crashing back down. Following that, thick purple juice flowed down the side of Heshi's leg. Soon after, a cyan flag had been rolled up, swaying and wobbling. It was brought in front of Heshi. Heshi could perceive that the purple abyss vine wanted to help improve her mood. Its scattered leaves softly swayed around, seeming to be both, taking credit for its achievement and asking for forgiveness. Clearly it had been cut everywhere by the cool breeze flag's hurricane, so miserable. But Heshi could sense the purple abyss vine's consciousness, very happy, very cheerful. Can help master, really is too great. Can punish the scoundrel that caused Dan to cry, really is too great. Heshi let out a soft breath and no longer attempted to reissue the flame. Instead she took the cool breeze flag from the purple abyss vine and extended her hand to softly touch it. Little purple, thank you. Heshi slowly said, but, in the future, you're not allowed to disobey my command and act on your own initiative. Otherwise, I'll remove our master and pet contract, do you hear me? The purple vine shook and its leaves started drooping down. Feeling wronged and trying to curry favor, it rubbed against Heshi's wrist. Heshi's pressed down on her forehead. This group of fellows really didn't let people be worry-free. These fellows really let people love dearly and take pity on them, ah. Her voice deepened, youngster, you can rest assured. I'll definitely make the old fools who hurt Shaoli and you guys pay the price. You guys have to have some faith in this Lauda, do you understand? Finished speaking, her fair wrist moved and the purple abyss vine quickly returned to her space. And her deeply cold gaze looked towards the distant Elder Zhang's ugly complexion. At this moment, Elder Zhang's complexion was extremely unsightly. He didn't expect his own cool breeze flag to be stolen by that purple devil plant. Although the cool breeze flag wasn't the most difficult to deal with magic weapon on him, this type of shame from being hit by the younger generation caused his killing intent towards Heshi to deepen. Thinking up to here, Elder Jiang quickly took out a long sword, sneering, you think that just because Lao Fu doesn't have the cool breeze flag anymore I won't be able to resist you anymore? Simply is indulging in wishful thinking. Qianzi sword, attack for me. After his words sounded out, the flying sword suddenly transformed into thousands of reflections of swords and began going towards Heshi. Soon the sword reflections flew in front of Heshi, but her face still had the ice-cold smile and she didn't show a bit of movement to resist it. At this moment, silver needles appeared on her hand and quickly entered each of the major acupuncture points. Heshi's movements were extremely fast and her expression was extremely concentrated. Even if the flying sword appeared in front of her and cut her clothes, she still seemed to lack any awareness. A moment later, the blood-stained youth, in the middle of all the sword reflections, lifted her head up. Using a cold voice, she slowly said, you want my replenishing arteries and veins extinct method? Good, I'll give it to you. When you arrive in hell, I'll personally roast it for you. After saying this, the spiritual energy in her body suddenly rose up and a burst of imposing manner surged up and came out. She painstakingly didn't move the protective cover and pushed out all the reflections of the swords surrounding her. The 1,000 reflections of the flying swords all turned back into one. But they didn't return to Elder Jiang, instead with a pang sound, it fell on the ground and lost the luster it previously had. Elder Jiang looked towards the youth in front of him, his foot stumbled as he kept walking backwards. His face was filled with shock. You. Gold core, how can you have the smell of a gold core martial artist? Little demon, in the end, what are you? What did you do just now? He just saw the youth's fiery gaze as the spiritual energy in his body frantically swelled and inky black, satiny hair flew around without wind. The entire person emitted an imposing power, pressing down on him. Where did they resemble a mere foundation establishment stage martial artist, they were clearly genuinely at gold core stage. In reality, at this moment, Heshi wasn't feeling too well. Just now, she used the silver needles to prick her acupuncture points, expanding her channels. In fact, this was a type of method that ignited the dantian and promoted strength. He had used this method in her past life before. It was just that, at that time, she didn't have spiritual power. What was ignited was actually inner power inside her dantian. Using this method, one could quickly promote one's body, but the cost was burning one's vitality. In her previous life, each minute she spent in this forced state, she exchanged approximately 1 year of her life. And naturally, at this moment, this method of igniting her dantian's spiritual power also needed compensation. But, in order for wet nurse Chen and Xiao Li's revenge, He threw caution to the wind and she couldn't change anything now. Elder Jiang suddenly recovered from his shock and the spiritual power in his body rushed up. Qianzi's sword, which had originally fallen to the side, hummed and rose up and rushed towards He. He wanted to take advantage of the fact that He's spiritual power was still unstable and kill him when he was unprepared. But, what caused Elder Jiang to become surprised was that when the Qianzi sword touched He's side, it suddenly got catapulted away. Unexpectedly, it didn't even get to damage the spiritual powered protective cover over He. It was the same as Gold Core stage. It was obvious to him that at this moment, He's spiritual power was far more powerful than his. At this moment, during Elder Jiang's bewildered state, the corners of He's mouth lifted up into a ridiculing smile. She faintly said, "So the 1,000-wind blade is just like this, nothing more." At this moment, He was scattering the cool breeze flag, the same way Elder Jiang did when he was releasing the 1,000-wind blade, in her sea of knowledge. Zijin Palace Hall's Maha Inheritance, Secret Duplication Method. When she advanced to Gold Core stage, this magic, which she had recently learned, began to automatically work. Originally, it seemed to be the large and formidable 1,000-wind blade, deconstructing and recombining, one by one, in her mind, it was no longer a secret. When she finished speaking, He's mind moved and the cool breeze flag in her hand flew out. As Elder Jiang's reaction was still catching up, the cool breeze flag became an engulfing sky storm, advancing towards Elder Jiang. What? 1,000-wind blade. This can't be. Elder Jiang let out a cry of surprise, practically dumbstruck. This is actually my Jiang family's own skill, how can you use it? Moreover, that cool breeze flag had already been used by me, how can you use it? Elder Jiang let out furious shouts as the twisting hurricane in front of him grew larger and larger, eventually enveloping him inside it. Inside the hurricane, sounds of Elder Jiang's angry questions, depressed groans, as well as the sound of the wind blades cutting his clothing and flesh. But, this scene continued to happen until a violent boom was suddenly heard in the center of the storm. Immediately, the entire hurricane exploded open. Leaves, sand, and dust settled on the ground as the hurricane gradually faded away. Lacking strength, the cool breeze flag also fell down into He's hands. Elder Jiang's eyes were blood red as he rigidly watched He, who was nearby. His eyes were filled with hatred and unspeakable fear. At this moment, his complexion was pale and there were bloodstains on his mouth. His clothes were all torn and his body was filled with cuts from the wind blades. How could he still possess the relaxation he had previously? It was extremely clear that in order to eliminate the 1,000-wind blade, he paid a price. Naturally, He didn't expect a small tornado would be able to get rid of this old fart. But she faintly laughed, "Old fool, the feeling of being injured by your own magic weapons isn't bad, right?" Elder Jiang became so angered, his body shook. He suddenly took out some medicine pills and stuffed it in his mouth, fiercely looking at He. "Did you think that the 1,000-wind blade flag was my most lethal magic weapon? You've merely learned a bit of superficial knowledge, yet you dare to strut around in front of me. Right now, I'm going to use my unique skill to dismember your body, you shameless youngster. If you have the ability, use my tricks again to come see me." He just finished speaking when the pressure from spiritual power in his body began pressing down harder. And inside his hand, a twinkling thunderlight, golden long sword appeared. When he waved his hand, the sound of thunder suddenly echoed from the long sword. thunder and wind rushing movement. Smelly youngster, drop dead for me. Momentarily, the entire desolate residence shook and countless pieces of clay and sand picked up in the hurricane and headed towards Heshi. At the same time, a clap of thunder and lightning which caused people's blood to run cold, sounded out. Elder Jiang had the wind and thunder dual spiritual roots. Although it couldn't be compared to heavenly spiritual roots, in Miluo continent, it could be considered a rarely seen good attribute. For him to get to today's achievement, he had used countless precious spiritual pills, and adding on 100 years of bitter cultivation, he had achieved gold core stage with great difficulty. If he lost to this yellow-mouthed child in front of him, what did his 100 years of payment count as? Heshi had been enveloped inside the hurricane, her spiritual protective cover was constantly being blown by the wind, causing it to become unstable and crack before maintaining itself again. Heshi's expression was extremely calm, her two eyes distributed warm rays of golden lights and in the blink of an eye, she moved towards Elder Jiang. When the wind and thunder rushing movement had been completely finished, Heshi's mouth curved up into a dazzling smile. A moment later, when she flipped her palm up, a wind and thunder-infused long sword appeared in her hand. Following that, in front of Elder Jiang's astonished gaze, Heshi resolutely waved the long sword. For a moment, hurricane and hurricane bumped, thunder and lightning tangled together and rumbled. The entire courtyard seemed as if it could no longer withstand the battle and the wall angrily collapsed. And a moment later, the hurricane which was originally attacking Heshi, seemed to have been swallowed, slowly it became weaker and melted away. At the same time, the earth-shaking thunder and lightning hurricane turned around and headed to attack Elder Jiang. Not possible. This isn't possible. This is absolutely not possible. Elder Jiang's eyes were filled with fright and despair. The thunder and wind rushing movement was their Jiang family's unique skill. Even his own family's younger generation could only learn this secret method through word of mouth. Why? Why could this youth learn it today? In the end, who was she? In the end, who was she? A moment later, he heard Heshi's clear and ridiculing voice sound out from a nearby place. Didn't you say that I could learn your unique skill? Thunder and wind rushing movement, in the end, it's just this and nothing more. Ah. Elder Jiang let out unresigned shouts. Following this, he was completely engulfed by the hurricane produced by wind and thunder rushing movement. Soon after, there were his bellows and the sound of his body being torn apart by the hurricane. This was his unique skill, now it had been completely exerted on his body. This wasn't only the torture on the body, it also ruined one's spirit. After the hurricane, Elder Jiang's body was similar to a piece of cloth. With a bump, he fell down on the floor and spit out a big mouthful of blood. There wasn't an intact piece of flesh on his body anymore. With a speed visible to the naked eye, his appearance and skin quickly aged. Heshi held on to a long sword in her hand. Advancing forward, she arrogantly looked at him. Out of fear, Elder Jiang instinctively wiggled his body, wanting to recoil. He repeatedly mumbled, "Forgive me. Forgive me. I am Jiang family's person, I can give you countless benefits. If you kill me, Elder Jiang certainly won't let you off. I already reported the matter of your replenishing arteries and veins method to my family. As long as you don't kill me, I'll conceal you from my family." Heshi's mouth curved up into a shallow smile. Her pretty facial features were outstanding, but she also had the characteristics of a youth's immaturity. But a moment later, the long sword in her hand whooshed out. It resolutely broke Elder Jiang's dantian. Naturally, I'll let you live. I'll let you live in pain for a while more. If not, how can you bear the pains you put onto my family's Shaoli? Elder Jiang let out a heart-tearing and lung-splitting howl. His entire body rapidly aged, his skin wrinkled, and his originally white skin turned whiter. Even a few of his teeth fell out. With his dantian shattered, his cultivation was considered gone and he became an ordinary person. An ordinary person who was over 100 years old, who was old and weak, who wanted to obtain this. But unfortunately, Elder Jiang had eaten countless talented treasures, so his vitality was difficult to lessen. He had clearly become an old man who was over 100, but he hadn't died. He could only painfully and bitterly look towards Heshi. At this moment, Heshi couldn't stand it anymore. The long sword in her hand dropped with a pang sound to the ground and her knees turned soft. Kneeling to the ground, she spit out a mouthful of blood. The silver needles in her body flew out and her dantian finally stopped igniting. Lao Da, are you all right? The little golden dragon raced out of her space and quickly began to support Heshi's body. Dan Dan also made his way out of her space and began weeping by Heshi's side. Mother, what's wrong with you? Don't scare Dan Dan. As he was talking, he was also sending spiritual chi to Heshi's body. When Dan Dan's spiritual chi and Heshi's entered her body, it quickly allowed her ignited dantian to feel much better. Heshi's complexion was still deathly pale, but she extended her hand to lightly rub Dan Dan's head. Be good Dan Dan, nothing is wrong with mother. Dan Dan held Heshi's hand and checked all over it, several times, before confirming that his beloved mother was truly all right. Then, he began to cry again. Mother, don't scare Dan Dan. Dan Dan doesn't want to see you wounded nor see you spitting out blood. Bad mother, you threw Dan Dan back into your space and got injured. In the future, Dan Dan will no longer trust you. Wah, one, ah ah ah. Heshi could coolly and elegantly laugh when a group of martial artists was being beat, but towards Dan Dan's sobbing, she lacked any means to. She knitted her eyebrows, feeling a headache. To the side, the little golden dragon watched the good play. Only when he saw Heshi was helpless to do anything, he walked forward to say, Dan Dan, the bad people who injured Lao Da aren't dead yet. Call Little Purple, let's properly entertain them together. One, wah, the sound of a child's cry. Upon hearing those words, Dan Dan stopped crying and his short legs slowly walked towards Elder Jiang's side. His round, small, pig-like body jumped onto Elder Jiang's stomach, shouting, Villain, you harmed mother. I'll kill you. The weight of Dan Dan pressing down on Elder Jiang caused his eyes to rotate to the white parts and caused him to spit out a mouthful of blood. Heshi stopped the several fellows, laughing helplessly, Don't play anymore, he's so weak right now, he won't be able to bear you guys tossing him around. If we let him die so easily, won't that be too convenient for him? Lao Da, do you have any good means? The little golden dragon excitedly jumped around in the air, we must let him properly experience pain. Elder Jiang raised his head, his eyes were filled with despair and hatred as he loudly roared at Heshi, My Jiang family won't let you off. Before he could finish yelling, copious amounts of medicinal powders appeared in Heshi's hands, which she then proceeded to sprinkle over his wounds. Suddenly, Elder Jiang, who had originally been at his last dying breath, began to violently shout as he rolled around on the floor. And what was even more terrifying was that his skin began to fall off in pieces. It resembled the snow-white lime on a wall that had been cracked and was falling off, exposing his bloody red internal flesh. The little golden dragon turned left and right in the air as he looked at the main culprit in such a miserable state, feeling indescribably excited. Lao Da, what type of medicine is this? Very ferocious, ah. Free and unfettered powdered medicine. Heshi carried the confused Dan Dan, covering his eyes so he couldn't see the bloody scene as she explained to the little golden dragon, First, your skin falls off in clumps. Next, it's your body's flesh. But even after all his skin and flesh had fallen off, he still won't die. Only until the rotting spreads to his heart and brain can he die. This type of torture will last, approximately, 12 days and nights. He can only endure the suffering, helplessly looking as he slowly inches towards death. Really is a pity, he's merely a common person now. I'm afraid that after a bit of pain torture, his body may not be able to endure anymore. But it's sufficient. Sufficient enough to offset all the pain he set upon Xiao Li's body. It's also sufficient enough to let wet Nurse Chen to be in peace in the 9 springs. Finished speaking, He took back all the magic weapons on the floor, including Elder Zhang's flying sword. Then she ordered the purple abyss vine, Little Purple, carefully search through this desolate residence. I want to ensure that, aside from these 2 old fellows, there isn't any living mouths. After approximately the time it took to burn a stick of incense, this desolate residence, located in the eastern outskirts of Yanjing City, suddenly let out a violent boom. Completely collapsing, it became ruins, enveloped in dense, scary air. Inside the ruins, aside from a monster that lacked all 4 limbs, a nose, mouth, ears, and eyes as well as a bloody person who howled in pain, there weren't any other creatures visible. As a result of this place being remote and it being late at night, nobody discovered this. Only until the 3rd day, a white-clothed male appeared in front of these ruins. Looking at the squirming freak with an incomplete body and the incessantly wiggling and screaming mincemeat on the floor, he couldn't help but knit his handsome eyebrows, exposing a suspicious expression. Eastern outskirts of Yanjing, he shouldn't have found the wrong place, ah. Clearly it was the day to deliver the goods, but how come there wasn't a shadow of any human beings? Furthermore, even the house had turned into ruins. In the end, what happened? Looking at the monster lacking all 4 limbs who was wiggling at him, it seemed to want to convey something. The white-clothed male expressed a loathing expression on his face. Even if they received Zijin Palace Hall's inheritance, what did he count as? He couldn't have obtained Sealed Dragon Domain's secret territory. Feng Tianba also quickly turned his thoughts back to Sealed Dragon Domain's secret territory. His voice was deep as he said, seeing as Sealed Dragon Domain's secret territory can exchange owners, an expert must have been the one who took control. Our Feng family doesn't need to compete against them in the future. As for that spring tree, Honored Sir Mu Hua already said he thought of an alternative method. Our Feng family's secret ministry is planning to plunder. You don't have to worry anymore. When he heard what he said, Feng Yunjing nodded his head. Immediately after, he knitted his eyebrows, but this time, Lian Ying was unable to obtain Zijin Palace Hall's inheritance. Useless person. Feng Tianba coldly snorted, then calmly said, how many years have we been planning, how much resources have been spent on her, how many preparations had been made for her for this trip to the Sealed Dragon Domain. Clearly success should have been assured, didn't expect that she was defeated under a Foundation establishment stage youngster's hand and even acted so hot-headedly in 100 Herb Mist. Practically is losing all of Feng family's face. If it wasn't for the sake of her master's face, I would have thrown her out of Feng family a long time ago. As Feng Tianba was speaking, anger was rolling over his face in bursts. Recalling the scene, outside of the secret territory, of Feng Lianying's bare body, he was itching to beat this daughter to death. Originally he wanted to wed her to Nangong Yu, firmly fastening him. But it seems like now, these thoughts must be dropped. This trash that can't be seen in public, Nangong Yu's eyes are higher than the top, how could she possibly meet his gaze? Speaking of the youngster that stole the Zijin Palace Hall inheritance, Feng Tianba deeply sighed and then handed a jade book to Feng Yunjing. Lowering his voice, he told him, I'm afraid this youngster isn't very simple, you take a look. Feng Yunjing's face was puzzled, taking the jade book, his expression was deep. A moment later, Feng Yunjing's face returned to his regular, without ripples face, one. Then, he let out an astonished expression, lowly saying, able to completely cure Ouyang Haoshuan's fractured meridians and even his cultivation level was reinstated to how it was previously. Genius Dr. Shi. Shiyu, father, are you certain they're the same person? Feng Tianba pursued his lips, from what you've said, that youth, Shiyu, received Zijin Palace Hall's inheritance. That in itself proves that he has medical skills. Adding on to that are his deeds in 100 Herb Mist, he clearly has much higher medical skills compared to Feng Lianing. On the world, there aren't many brilliant doctors. Yet it just happens that 2 suddenly appear, and both are surnamed Shi. Moreover, I also heard that the genius Dr. Shi who cured Ouyang Haoshuan was a 17 or 18-year-old youth. Therefore, I'm 90% certain that this youth called Shi Yu is the genius Dr. Shi that's caused the medical world to go crazy. Talking up to here, Feng Tianba's gaze turned serene. Yun Jing, although this time's operation, at the secret territory, was a fail, you can't say we didn't gain anything from it. Regarding this Shiyu, you must clarify for me, if he truly has such godly methods, our Feng family needs to rush to hold him inside-out hands. A blaze burned in Feng Yunjing's eyes before quickly disappearing, and immediately after, he seemed to have thought of something. His expression was faint as he lowered his voice and asked, "But father, how should we deal with Nan Gongyu? His relationship with that Shiyu appears to be excellent. For that Shiyu he didn't hesitate to clash with me." Feng Yunjing, himself, didn't know where his thoughts were. He found out that Shiyu could possibly be a woman, and Nan Gongyu and Shiyu's intimacy was all concealed. Naturally, Feng Tianba thought Nan Gongyu's favor of Shiyu was due to his medical skills, so his expression was grave as he said, "Nan Gongyu, if you can avoid, then avoid. By all means, you must not go and deliberately provoke him. He isn't someone you can bother right now." Having heard what he said, Feng Yunjing's complexion sunk and his heart was filled with refusal. Nan Gongyu was at nascent soul stage, he was also at nascent soul stage. And adding on to that was the numerous, difficult to deal with, magical weapons owned by Feng family. Feng Yunjing didn't believe that he would lose to him. Why did father say he was someone he couldn't provoke? Feng Yunjing ground his teeth. "Father, don't speak, he only has this bit of skill. Even if he's very difficult to deal with, you're his life-saving benefactor. Don't tell me he can bite the hand that feeds him. Why should we need to avoid him like a taboo?" Well, without Ripple's face, poker face. When he heard what was said, Feng Tianba became startled. Then, he shook his head. Life-saving benefactor. He hadn't finished speaking when his voice turned mocking halfway through. Feng Yunjing was about to ask when Feng Tianba immediately waved his hand, "All you need to know is to not provoke Nan Gongyu, it'll be all right then. Regarding Shiyu's matters, secretly investigate them. If you're certain, quietly make contact with him. With our Feng family's status, as long as he's sensible, I don't believe a mere foundation establishment stage martial artist won't be tempted. As long as Shiyu is willing to submit himself to Feng family, even Nan Gongyu can't do anything, right?" Feng Yunjing ground his teeth, "But father, nowadays, Nan Gongyu is becoming stronger and won't consent to join us by marriage. I'm afraid he'll become a big worry for our Feng family in the future." "Okay, you don't have to worry about this matter anymore." Feng Tianba waved his hands, preventing him from asking any more questions. "If there's nothing else, withdraw first." Feng Yunjing's expression fluctuated, but seeing Feng Tianba's dignified expression, he swallowed any remaining words he had and quickly left the room. After Feng Yunjing retreated, approximately the time it took to burn a stick of incense later, a white figure appeared in the doorway of Feng Tianba's study. This person was precisely the white-clothed male who appeared at Jiang family's other courtyard. At this moment, he was carrying a bag. The bag seemed to have something incessantly squirming inside it, so much so that you could even faintly hear someone's hoarse yells coming from within. When this person entered the study, he humbly saluted Feng Tianba. With a lowered voice, he reported, "Clan head, the situation has changed. The underground testing pharmacy in Yanjing's eastern outskirts seemed to have been destroyed by someone. Subordinate used spiritual skills to investigate, and all of the bound black spirit plants have been completely destroyed. There's also this." The white-clothed male shook the bag and it loosened slightly. The bag began to open when the thick smell of rotting blood assaulted one's senses. Accompanying the smell was the sound of a hoarse and broken voice. A mincemeat skeleton appeared in front of their eyes. All the internal organs and blood in the skeleton had filled up the bag. But what was strange was that this person had already turned into this weird monster, but that mutilated skull was completely intact. Furthermore, it could even let out such pained howls. This scene was truly too terrifying and strange. Feng Tianba shook for half a day before saying in disbelief, "This is Elder Jiang." Once Feng Yunjing exited Feng Tianba's study, his face turned gloomy. That beautiful yet icy appearance kept flashing through his eyes. But, that face was peach-colored towards Nan Gongyu. It was somewhat prettier than this immortal manor's exquisite jade flower trees. From childhood, Feng Yunjing got whatever he wanted. Which woman didn't stick to him like a housefly when she saw him? Only this Shi Yu. Refusing his invitation 3 times, even facing him with a long sword. If it wasn't for Nan Gongyu supporting her, she was a mere foundation establishment stage martial artist. Where would one find the courage to refuse him, who would have the capability to refuse him? The secret desire, hope and envy at the bottom of his heart burned, causing his grave and stern expression to distort. Standing in the middle of a pavilion, Feng Yunjing tightly clenched his fist around a stone pillar, mumbling to himself, "Shiyu, you're destined to be mine, unable to escape my palm. When I kill Nan Gongyu, you'll become my person. I'll have you kneeling in front of me, begging me to love you. Young master, you've returned." Suddenly, a tender and soft female's voice interrupted Feng Yunjing's thoughts. Soon after, a woman full of gold and jade with beautiful and elegant features threw herself into Feng Yunjing's embrace. "Young master, this time you left for such a long time. Yenna really missed you." When a fragrant and overly sweet woman threw herself into his embrace, it should be warm, fragrant and jade. But Feng Yunjing suddenly thought of something. When that person neared him, the faint smell of herbal medicine hit him in the face. There wasn't any of the woman's beauty nor pampering, instead, it was an uncontrollable and strong feeling of indifference. Suddenly, Feng Yunjing felt as if the smell of cosmetics disgusted him. He shook off the woman that threw herself into his embrace and coldly said, "Go away. Seeing you makes me feel nauseous." Finished speaking, his figure disappeared. The woman who had been left inside the pavilion first stared blankly, then her pretty face warped. Previously, she was a servant girl in Feng family. Because her appearance was outstanding, she was chosen to be Feng Yunjing's personal servant girl. Being young master's servant girl meant that inevitably, there would be a day she would become young master's woman. Chen Yenner had always been arrogant, she was the prettiest and cleverest woman by young master's side. Although young master's heart was cold, he would occasionally treat her warmly. But today she clearly saw loathing in young master's eyes. Chen Yenner angrily punched the stone pillar, mumbling fragments to herself, "Shiyu?" In the end, where did this vixen Shiyu that young master speaks of come from? I need to have this person properly investigated. Wanting to seduce young master, I want you to properly understand not knowing shamelessness. Igniting one's dantian, naturally one would need to pay the price. Therefore, after Heshi returned to Bi courtyard, she didn't even have enough time to relocate everyone inside the secret territory before she sunk into a coma. Dan Dan and the little golden dragon stood by Heshi's side the entire night, neither of them dared to even move 1 foot away, and Dan Dan cried until his eyes were red and swollen. Wu Xian used his spiritual energy to search for the condition of Heshi's injury and wrinkled his eyebrows. Heshi's injury was extremely severe. Her Dantian's spiritual energy was close to being drained, but what was even more urgent was that, after losing consciousness, Heshi developed a fever. And this type of fever rendered her incapable of receiving any spiritual energy externally, even feeding her supplementary spiritual energy, didn't work. Dan Dan lied down next to Heshi, grabbing her hand. He had cried so much his voice turned hoarse. "Mother, you clearly said that nothing would happen. You said you wouldn't abandon Dan Dan." Woo woo woo. To the side, the little golden dragon comfortingly patted the little fellow. But he was also worried sick and couldn't say any comforting words. When they were at Jiang family's other courtyard at the eastern outskirts, he thought that Lao Da's injury wasn't too serious. Lauda didn't show any symptoms of being an ill person, she could even cheerfully and wittily punish that old BAS. But how could he forget? Lauda's true cultivation stage was merely meridian stage. Breaking out into high-level gold core stage would undoubtedly have a price. As the night turned a bit darker, Hashi continued to have a fever. Her face was flushed and she remained unconscious. Dan cried and under the little golden dragon's pacifying, he fell asleep. The little golden dragon lay by the headboard, scouring his inherited memories for any means to save Hashi. Suddenly, Wu Xian's, who was standing in the doorway, expression turned cold. He quickly stood up and a flying sword appeared in his hand. But, his flying sword just appeared in his hands when the grave expression on his face turned into shock. He blurted out, "Master, you. Why did you come?" The arriving person was travel-worn and their face was haggard. Shockingly, it's Nangong Yu. Nangong Yu completely ignored Wu Xian. He quickly walked towards the front of the bed and softly carried her. Due to her having a fever, the girl's cheeks were flushed and her originally soft and pink lips had lost all their color, and even began showing cracked lines. 1. Supplementary spiritual energy to at least get her to a more stable place in her dantian. Long eyelashes hung down, covering up a pair of cold, phoenix eyes. A faint silhouette shone on snow-white skin, causing the person to appear frail and helpless. It was completely different when compared to her ordinary craftiness, the appearance of not letting anything or person control her. Nangong Yu softly let out a breath. The pair of hands that carried Hashi tightened, his heart welled up with regret and pity. "Little girl, why do you have to be so stubborn?" He lowered his head, softly murmuring, "Why didn't you ask for my help? Why can't you rely on me? Am I so unworthy of your trust?" He said such reprimanding words, but his tone was filled with pampering and tenderness. His slender fingers softly played with her messy hair and his expression was that of someone who was tending to the most precious treasure. The little golden dragon who was sleeping at the head of the bed finally woke up from his dreams and loudly shouted, "You! Who are you? Who let you touch Lauda's body as you wished?" The little golden dragon's yells woke up the originally unconscious Dan. Dan rubbed his swollen eyes, and at a glance, he saw Nangong Yu who was carrying Hashi in his embrace. He cried out, "Beautiful Gidge, mother is injured. Quickly save her. You're so awesome, help mother wake up quicker, okay?" Woo. Nangong Yu's usual calm turned distracted now. The crying spiritual pet before him was a pink pig. Moreover, this little pig called Hashi mother but called him beautiful Gidge. Nangong Yu's mouth twitched and turned down. Immediately, he restored his usual calm and indifferently said, "Naturally, my coming here was to come and save Sheer." After saying this, his fingers softly cut across his own wrist and very quickly, a dark red trail of blood came out of the wound. "Master, how can you waste blood essence at such an important time?" Wu Xian's face was filled with anxiety, he practically wanted to run over and stop Nangong Yu. But, one of Nangong Yu's cold glances stopped him from acting blindly without thinking. "Don't forget why I pushed the plan earlier." A stern voice containing gloominess was heard, "Wu Xian, I'll forgive you for this time. Next time, if Hashi retains injuries again, you don't have to return to Hell King Manor." After hearing what was said, Wu Xian turned rigid. A slight chill ran across his back and after a while, he finally mustered up one word, "Yes." In fact, this time, he wanted to teach Hashi a lesson. So when Hashi had him stay in B courtyard, he didn't follow her and merely gave a protective jade slip. During this time, although Wu Xian's person was at B courtyard, his soul had always been paying attention to the movements of the jade slip. As long as Hashi called for help, he would immediately rush over. He thought that Hashi was merely at foundation establishment stage and that the opposite side would just have a group of martial artists at high-level meridian stage. In any case, Hashi couldn't possibly be their rival and by that time, she would certainly cry to him for help. But, how could Wu Xian think that Heshi would be able to massacre all the people and even take down a high-level gold core stage expert, all by herself? Foundation establishment stage battling a gold core stage, ah. This completely exceeded common sense. All that was left was a profound sense of admiration and reverence. Nangong Yu coldly snorted and didn't continue speaking. Instead, he brought the wound on his wrist closer to Heshi's mouth and slowly fed it to her. The little golden dragon suspiciously looked at Nangong Yu as he snatched Dan Dan. Whispering into Dan Dan's ear, he quietly asked, "This person is green onion or garlic, ah? You let him stay by Lao Da's side. Won't have bad intentions." Dan Dan blinked his big eyes and flattened his lips. Beautiful Gidge is a good person, he's saved Mother multiple times. Moreover, Dan Dan has seen Mother play and kiss with beautiful Gidge. Long Long, what is benefiting at others' expense? Little golden dragon, when the purine blood went into her stomach, her inflamed dantian seemed to have been given spring stream and slowly returned to its original state. Nangong Yu pressed his left hand on Heshi's back and slowly channeled his spiritual energy into her body, cautiously restoring her dantian which had been burned. After the time it took to burn a stick of incense, the pained expression on Heshi's face slowly disappeared, becoming peaceful. But Nangong Yu's complexion turned deathly pale. His originally tired eyes had greenish-black ash added onto them. To the side, Wu Xian was full of anxiousness. He wanted to step up and ask to substitute as the person giving Heshi spiritual energy. But he was quickly glared at by Master with his cold eyes. Nangong Yu used his hand to feel Heshi's forehead. After ensuring that she no longer had a fever, he loosened his breath and extended his hand to wipe away the perspiration on her forehead. The room turned tranquil and ambiguous. Nangong Yu tightly held on to Heshi and his line of sight never moved away, not even for a second. He wanted to stay like this forever, to have her by his side forever. But right now, he couldn't. If his matters weren't finished, then if Heshi were to stay by his side, there was a possibility that danger would happen one day. So much so that she may even die a violent death. This was something he couldn't endure, even if he died. Nangong Yu slowly released his hands and stood up. "I'm leaving, take good care of her. Furthermore, don't let Heshi know of my coming here and you absolutely cannot let other people know either." Finished speaking, he faced the two fellows by Heshi's bedside. "Did you clearly hear me?" The little golden dragon and Dan Dan acted like they were awed and simultaneously nodded their heads. Their appearances were extremely lovable and cute. Nangong Yu leaned over to leave a light kiss on Heshi's forehead before turning around to leave. But, when he had just reached the doorway, he suddenly turned around. His serene eyes closely watched Dan Dan as he gloomily said, "When you see me next time, you must not call me beautiful Gidge. You have to call me Daddy, do you hear me?" "Heard. Heard it." Dan Dan's face was dumbfounded. Under Nangong Yu's intense gaze, he obediently nodded his head. Wu Xian turned his head to facepalm. "Master, is threatening Wang Fei's spirit pets really good when she's in a coma?" If he remembered correctly, Wang Fei still hasn't agreed to marry into his house. Heshi felt that this sleep was endless. A painful and burning torture accompanied beside her in sleep. She felt as if she had been thrown into Taisheng Laozi's refining pill stove like Monkey Sun was, one. It was scalding hot everywhere, it was painful everywhere. This sort of torment continued for a long time, but soon after, someone softly brought her into their embrace. That hug was extremely tender and doting, and even carried traces of familiarity. This allowed her body and mind to relax. Soon after, an ice-cold clear spring and bloody-smelling stream entered her throat and went into her dantian. Following this, the burning pain faded away without a trace. Even her bruised dantian was moistened by this spiritual energy blood, slowly restoring. The early morning's warm sunshine sprinkled across her snow-white and jade-like skin and stroking her soft hair. Her long eyelashes faintly trembled as Heshi slowly opened her eyes. "Mother." Before she could make out everything in front of her, she felt a short and stout heavily crashing into her embrace. Soon after, she heard the child's familiar weeping. 1. Taisheng Laozi's refining pill stove like monkey sun. This is a reference to the book Journey to the West. Taisheng is a title of respect for Taoists, and Laozi was an ancient Chinese philosopher and writer. Monkey Sun is Sun Wukong, aka the Monkey King. He is most well known from Journey to the West, one of the 4 great classical novels of Chinese literature. Heshi is referring to the time that Sun Wukong was thrown into Laozi's refining pill stove or 8-way trigram crucible. You can read more on this here. If it weren't for, after, Dan Dan's words were half said when Wu Xian, who was standing to the side, lightly kuged and walked forward. Wang Fei, the servants inside your courtyard have already been waiting outside for a long time. Because you were not awake, they did not dare to act on their own initiative and deal with the corpses. May I ask whether or not you wish to go outside right now and explain it to them? Heshi hadn't even said anything, but Wu Xian's words caused Dan Dan's complexion to change and he quickly shut his mouth. Heshi wrinkled her eyebrow and suspiciously casted a glance at Wu Xian, then looked at Dan Dan again. Dan Dan, what were you just saying? If it weren't for, after what? Nothing. Nothing. Dan Dan's small head shook like a rattle. Dan Dan never said after. Heshi looked towards the little golden dragon, whose face conveyed a, I don't understand what you're talking about, expression. Mysterious and secretive, what are you up to? Heshi muttered, no longer trying to understand these few fellows, and walked out of the room. Chapter 408 Heavenly Paradise. When Shi Jia and the others saw that Heshi was healed, they all seemed to become better at the same time as well. Then, they suddenly ran up in front of Heshi and kneeled down on the floor with a plop sound. Miss, you're okay, you're okay. Really is too great. Clearly they were a group of rough men, but now, each and every one of them was crying. Some were even sobbing, repeatedly saying, Miss. It really caused Heshi to not know whether to laugh or cry. Shi Jia wiped away his tears and he said, with his voice choked with emotion, Miss, may I ask, where should we bury Wet Nurse Chen's body? Do you need me to create a burial mound for her behind B Courtyard's mountain? When he mentioned Wet Nurse Chen, Heshi's eyes dimmed a little and a thread filled with heavy sorrow streaked through her eyes. She was silent for a long time before softly saying, no need to, this B Courtyard isn't safe anymore. Soon, we'll have to change our place. Regarding Wet Nurse Chen and the others' bodies, use spiritual jade to preserve them. We will send them to an earthly paradise to be buried. After confirming her own body was alright, Heshi didn't pause and began to arrange a follow-up plan. It was very clear that Naylan family's B Courtyard is no longer safe. Heshi had too many treasures that others coveted, but her strength was too weak. She had no means to display these treasures' former might. If it was just herself, she wouldn't be afraid of anyone coming over to plunder and long for her treasures. But when thinking of Wet Nurse Chen's death and Xiao Li's skinned appearance, lingering fear bubbled forth in Heshi's heart. Ordinary people were innocent, treasuring a jade ring becomes a crime. She could protect Xiao Li, Shi Jia, and the others for a short period of time, but not for a lifetime. Rather than constantly worrying about their safety, it would be better to think of ways to increase their strength, so that they would be able to defend themselves. Give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. And the best location to promote and protect Shi Jia and the others was naturally sealed Dragon Domain's secret territory. Before leaving, Heshi had people return this B Courtyard left by Naylan Manor to its former state. She prepared to go outside to purchase some little servant girls and manservants to clean B Courtyard. After all, this was the place that Naylan Heshi and Wet Nurse Chen had lived in for over 10 years, leaving behind many irremovable marks. What's more, if people from Naylan Manor decided to visit one day, this was a good way to pull the wool over their eyes. After leaving, Heshi quickly took out a light dress and entered Sung Mountain with everyone in tow. The band sent bursts of bright light, and in the blink of an eye, everyone appeared in a dark green grassland. There weren't any pavilions or kiosks here. But there were dark blue lakes, seas of flowers, and green spiritual plants. The sky was dark blue and the spiritual energy in the air was plentiful. There were also the clear sounds of songbirds and insects coming from far away. This let everything be filled with picturesque charm. The three fellows, Dan, the little golden dragon, and Xiao Li, had long ago stopped controlling themselves. They ran into the cluster of flowers to roll around and play. Even the purple abyss vine was unwilling to lose out, its purple vines danced about as it ran towards the three fellows to play. One could hear their bursts of laughter, and for no apparent reason, their hearts would feel lighter and brighter. But everyone who entered this heavenly paradise, aside from Heshi and those several simple-minded spiritual pets, who would still have the mind to be lively and play. They all had their eyes wide open and didn't dare believe everything they saw. Zhang San, no. Now he had already changed his name to Shi-san. Chapter 409 Settle in Sealed Dragon Territory's Secret Territory. Shi-san couldn't help but seize the meat on his face, muttering, "Miss, you're saying we'll be settling here? The spiritual energy here is richer than Water Moon's Zongbao Mountain." Settle here? What? You don't want to? No, not that. How could I not be willing? Shi-san excitedly answered, even his words shook. "Miss, how did you find this place? Are we still inside Song Mountain? Such a valuable place, ah. Those cultivators won't come and fight with us, right?" Heshi faintly smiled and didn't mind everyone as she dropped a bomb on them. "This is Sealed Dragon Domain's most comfortable greenwood realm. Right now, I'm the master of Sealed Dragon Domain. The entire Sealed Dragon Domain is considered my territory. You say, can we not settle here? Sealed Dragon Territory's secret territory." This time, it wasn't only Shi-san. Even Shi Jia and the others let out cries of surprise. Heavens! What was Miss saying? This was Sealed Dragon Territory's secret territory. It was the place all those cultivators forcibly took earlier, and the place filled with countless treasures, Sealed Dragon Territory. It was the Sealed Dragon Territory that even nascent soul stage martial artists were somewhat afraid of and wouldn't enter to explore unless they had made preparations. It was that place. The place that, to them previously, wasn't completely out of reach. The Sealed Dragon Domain's secret territory that they didn't even dreaming of going to join the chaos to treasure hunt. Moreover, Miss was now the owner of Sealed Domain's secret territory. In other words, every inch inside this secret territory and every magic weapon all belonged to Miss. Shi-san suddenly felt a bit muddle-headed and felt that it was somewhat hard to breathe. Heavens, he really wanted to know, what other world-shattering news did his family's Miss have to give afterwards to cause him to explode? Shi Jia and the others' thoughts, by comparison, were much more blunt and simple. After Heshi confirmed that this secret territory, that everyone was scrambling to plunder, was theirs, everyone let out enthusiastic shouts. The little golden dragon unsteadily flew in front of the excited crowd of people, arrogantly pouring cold water on them. Hang. If it wasn't for the fact that you are Lao Da's slaves, you would have never been given such a gift by Lao Da. Ben Zun would have never consented to allowing you inside. I'm warning you, the matters regarding the secret territory cannot be spread out. If you dare to even leak one character outside, hang. I'll immediately let you become a departed spirit. Shi Jia and the others only considered this for a second before they understood the severity behind these words. This was Sealed Domain's secret territory. Countless nascent soul martial artists wished to plunder it. If outsiders knew that their Miss owned it now, wouldn't all the martial artists in Miluo continent look at Miss as a target to plunder and chase? At once, Shi Jia and the others kneeled down to Heshi. Miss, be at ease. We swear we won't leak out anything regarding Sealed Dragon Domain to anyone else. If we go against this oath, lightning will strike us and we'll die without a corpse. He waved her hand, faintly saying, "First, you guys go build a few simple residences. Afterwards, everyone come down and find a nice place to bury wet Nurse Chen." Shi Jia and the others repeatedly answered yes, then they quickly got busy. Previously, although they passed comfortable lives inside Nalan Manor's B courtyard and their strength made progress, they were at a loss and confused. But today, they saw sealed dragon domain's heavenly paradise, all their confusion and loss disappeared. At this moment, Shi San, Shi Jia, and the others no longer had any doubts. Chapter 410 Cultivation Plan. As long as they followed Miss, they would definitely become strong. Moreover, they would become stronger than they didn't even dare to dream of before. There weren't any talented builders in Shi Jia and the others, so naturally, the buildings they made couldn't be said to be cozy. On the second day, after seeing everyone cuddled together with her and the several things pressed down on her, causing her to become numb, she rose up with the intention to pick some slaves. Specifically, skilled slaves. Furthermore, the most important matter today was to prepare the training plan for the people by her side. Her bringing Shaoli, Shi Jia, and the others in here wasn't to let them peacefully play inside Greenwood Realm. Rather, she wanted to train them, to let them become powerful. The realms in sealed dragon territory, aside from Greenwood Realm, were Water Moon Realm, Burning Heaven Realm, Ice Snow Realm, and Desolate Desert Realm. Among these, Burning Heaven Realm, Ice Snow Realm, and Desolate Desert Realm's terrain were particularly nasty. There were a good deal of magical beasts roaming around. It could be said to be the best place for martial artists to refine and train their bodies. Previously, Heshi had no means to let Shi Jia and the others refine their bodies. Apart from letting them train their bodies by refining pills for them, there weren't any other alternatives. But after her visit to the 100 Herb Mist, she obtained various refining body methods. Some were ones that she plundered and some were exchanged for the antidote. Among these was a method called Demonic Terminating Method. She really admired it. This method didn't require one to be a cultivator, they only had to have a high amount of natural talent. But the cultivation process required the body to suffer an enormous amount of pain for a short period of time. It needed someone who was extremely tough and had a lot of willpower. And Shi Jia and the others were slaves, they had passed through many masters, suffered much pain and humiliation. This type of person's temperament would be tough and they would desire power. Heshi could see this through the previous mission she gave them. No matter how bitter or tired they were, nobody complained or became lazy. As long as one could endure the cultivation process pain, suffering, and forging, one could achieve demonic gold body. In Miluo continent, this so-called demonic gold body was practically equal to the existence of an undying body. Even a hit from a nascent soul stage martial artist, using their full strength, wouldn't be strong enough to take them down. Of course, the description of the method said that Miluo continent never had anyone who obtained demonic gold body. Even if the people who obtained earthly demon gold body was exceptionally few. Earthly demon gold body was equivalent to the cultivation of the summit of gold core stage. If Shi Jia and the others were able to achieve this stage, they could be considered to have the utmost capability to protect themselves in Miluo continent. Heshi gave Shi Jia and the other 10 people 3 tasks in order to assess them. They could only leave Burning Heaven, Ice and Snow, and Desolate Desert Realm after they finished cultivating and went through the trial. And if they passed the trial and achieved Foundation Establishment stage, Shi Jia and the others could begin to cultivate Demonic Terminating Method. After arranging Shi Jia and the several other people's cultivation plan, the next person was Shaoli. Shaoli's innate talent was extraordinary, however, she practiced enchanted power. The spiritual beasts inside this sealed dragon domain were abundant, it was suited for martial artists to cultivate. But, it wasn't suitable for the enchanted race to cultivate. Moreover, Dan Dan and the little dragon could cultivate in her Shumi mustard subspace, slowly promoting their strength. Only Shaoli didn't have much of a helping hand in her space. Even the ninth secluded spring water seemed to lose its effect after she drank half of it. After muttering to herself for a moment, she asked for Xiao Li's opinion. Sealed Dragon Domain doesn't have any enchanted power, it's not suited for you to cultivate. If you want to become strong, you have two alternatives right now. One way is to leave me and go to the magical beast forest. There's an abundant amount of enchanted energy there, it can help you advance in your cultivation. I'll give you a life-saving jade slip, if you meet some calamity, I don't want to leave Miss. He didn't get to finish speaking before Xiao Li threw herself into her arms and impatiently said, I promised Gidge I would follow by Miss' side. Moreover, I would hate to part with Miss. Miss, can you not push me away? He rubbed her head and helplessly replied, I didn't want to push you away. It's just that, the second option is rather dangerous. Not only that, it'll raise your murderous thoughts, you're still young, I originally didn't wish for you to, I'm not afraid of danger nor murderous thoughts. Xiao Li's face was firm, clenching her fist, she vowed, I want to become extremely strong and powerful, so I can help out Mississippi. So I can protect Miss and Gidge. He nodded her head, since it's like this, then I'll send you to Desolate Desert Realm's Black Desert. But, it isn't as safe as a training location as Shijia and the others, rather it's the desert with the most concentrated amount of magical beasts. Although Sealed Dragon Domain doesn't contain enchanted power, the internal core of the magical beasts contains a large quantity of enchanted power. If you refine their internal cores, you can change them into enchanted power to cultivate. But, the magical beasts inside Desolate Desert Realm's Black Desert are incomparably cruel and powerful, and they have already lost all rationality long ago. All that's left is a bloodthirsty instinct. Even with your charming ability and ability to talk to all creatures, they would be unable to display affection. There will be nothing but continuous battling before you can obtain what you want. With it like this, do you still wish to go and try your hand? Without the slightest hesitation, Xiao Li nodded her head. Her snowy face didn't have any trace of wavering, I want to go. As long as I can help Miss, I'm not afraid of any hardship. Not only that, Miss is so awesome, Xiao Li doesn't wish to pull Miss' leg. Xiao Li, Shijia, and the others were quickly sent into the Desolate Desert Realm. The little golden dragon also began its cultivation inside her space. All that was left was Dan Dan, the little foodie. As before, he ate fine foods, slept, and he rolled about in all types of fields, acting cute and spoiled. His days couldn't have been passed more comfortably. But, in Heshi's heart, Dan Dan was different. Dan Dan was her closest relative in this world. Heshi wished to pamper him, indulge him, and give him the happiest and most comfortable life. As for Heshi, she wouldn't let herself waste any second of time that could be used to let herself become stronger. After settling everyone, she quickly entered her space and began to cultivate non-stop. The methods in Heshi's hands currently weren't few, but after she began to cultivate the Maha inheritance, these methods, that she had taken from the hands of other martial artists, couldn't meet her eyes. But, Heshi also discovered an odd thing. Because her body possessed the 5 elements of spiritual power, Heshi originally wanted to study all the attributes of the method, so she could balance her cultivation. After all, nowadays she used her fire and water attributes the most, much more compared to her other attributes. But after searching through the methods, she discovered to her shock, there wasn't any method correlating to the wood attribute. In addition, she remembered that in the overflowing pill cauldron scripture, it had clearly said that the wood attribute was considered the strongest attribute for a doctor, representing the origin and recovery of one's life. But, she had never seen anyone using a wooden attribute to treat injuries before in these ancient books or records. Truly is strange. Don't tell her that this method was incomplete and only the wood attribute was missing. For a moment, Heshi was at a loss. But, then she no longer thought about this problem and began to earnestly practice the Maha inheritance. The terror and power of this inheritance was evident in her battle with Elder Jiang, it caused Heshi to feel unlimited yearning and confidence towards it. If so, she could replicate her capabilities at the time and completely copy her opponent's unique skills. So in this way, wouldn't she be invincible? But, what caused Heshi to feel gloomy was that, ever since she had ignited her dantian, she was unable to attain a clear meditative state. When she was in B courtyard, she allowed Wu Xian to display his unique skill. After trying to duplicate it, she couldn't. Heshi sat cross-legged inside the mustard subspace of the Spirit Ferment Palace Hall. She was recalling the scene of her and Elder Jiang fighting earlier. Alongside the images of their fighting slowly playing out in her mind, the spiritual power in her body began to flow along a predetermined trajectory. The spiritual power began to revolve faster and faster. Soon, a small whirlpool appeared in her dantian. When these whirlpools appeared, Heshi found that her senses became unprecedentedly keen and penetrating. Everything around her became incomparably wonderful. It was as if it had become a part of her body. There weren't any secrets. She could even sense the spiritual qi and nutrient transportation in the spiritual plants located in the medicinal field. She could detect each inhabitant in the soil of the ancient rhyme spiritual field. Obviously, she had not used any godly records. But when she closed her eyes, she could clearly see everything, within 10 meters, inside and outside her space. This feeling was truly too profound. Not only was her perception magnified, it seemed like she had become the master of this piece of land. If Heshi stayed in this world for a bit longer, she would come to understand that this state is called clear meditation. In Miluo continent, even if one was a high-rank nascent soul stage martial artist, it was impossible to attain. This mental state was classified as something in legends. The Maha inheritance's function was to speed up the cultivator's spiritual power revolving and forcibly reach this state. But, with Heshi's current spiritual power, she was only able to stay in this state for a second before she was forced out. After a month passed, when Heshi left her space, she felt defeated. Throughout this month, without rest, she had squeezed out her spiritual power to practice the Maha inheritance. But, after a month had flown by, she was only able to touch the doorstep of the Maha inheritance. As for the clear meditation state that allowed her to replicate others' abilities, she was only able to stay in it for 3 seconds. 3 seconds, this was too short. Wanting to learn other people's abilities in 3 seconds was a fantasy. Hearing Heshi's unconscious grumbles, the little golden dragon, who was off to the side cultivating, felt the corner of his mouth twitching and his face was filled with secrecy. Lauda already earned an advantage but was still ungrateful. One had to understand that entering the Maha inheritance's doorway was the hardest step. In order for ordinary martial artists to even touch the doorstep of clear meditation, it would take them a year's time. His previous master was the creator of the Maha inheritance, but when he first replicated someone else's ability, he still failed. But his family's Lauda. On her first try, she was able to replicate 2 big skills. Currently, she was still at Meridian stage and could already touch the doorstep to clear meditation. Yet she still feels it's too slow. Does she even let the other martial artists live? Chapter 413 Borderless Black Market. After exiting the mountain, Heshi first went to offer sacrifices to Wet Nurse Chen. Then, she checked Shaoli, Shi Jia, and the others' progress in their cultivation before she left Sealed Dragon Domain's secret territory and returned to B Courtyard. Currently, B Courtyard at the foot of Tsang Mountain was completely different than she had left it. She didn't know where Shi-san had bought several servants from. They cleaned B Courtyard and left it neat and tidy. Currently, people were going in and out of B Courtyard. It was full of life. It contrasted against the previously bloody and gloomy scene. "Miss, you're here." When Shi-san saw Heshi, he was pleasantly surprised and immediately greeted her. Heshi nodded her head and offered a sentence of praise. "B Courtyard has been managed quite well." Shi-san was brimming with happiness. His eyes were filled with cheerfulness and complacentness. "Many thanks for Miss compliment. Xiaoda, 1, doesn't have any cultivation skills and can't protect Miss like Shi Jia and the others can. I'm very happy to be able to handle matters for Mississippi." Shisen welcomed Heshi into the courtyard's central room to sit down, and he quickly arranged for some servant girls to deliver refreshments. Earlier, these servant girls and menservants already saw Heshi's portrait, therefore, they knew that she was this courtyard's true master. Naturally, Heshi had no interest towards these bland refreshments. She just softly turned her teacup around as she listened to Shisen report what had happened these past few days. "Miss, you don't know, last time, when you gave me the supplement spirit pill before you entered Sealed Dragon Domain, I went to get it appraised at Royal Medicine Courtyard. In the end, the result of the evaluation alarmed the manager of the Medicine Courtyard. Including crystal spiritual power, the pill's pure essence was 99%. Ah. Miss, you didn't see the look of that group of people's eyes bulging out. The group of people captured me, wishing they could immediately sign a big order with me." Heshi raised her eyebrow. "Did you sign with them?" "Where would I dare to? Ah." Shisen promptly responded. "Xiaoda understands the argument Miss previously said about money not being able to be revealed. If Xiaoda signs a contract with Royal Medicine Courtyard's people, it would be easy for them to track everything back to here. Therefore, Xiaoda just obtained the evaluation list before secretly running away. Afterward, I put the pill on sale in black market." Speaking up to here, Shisen saw that Heshi's eyes were already bright, full of admiration and disbelief. Hey, miss, do you know how high the price was raised for this supplement spirit pills? In the beginning, it was only 2,000 yuan crystals per pill. Moreover, there were also some people in the black market who cursed those people as fools, certain that I had tricked them with fake appraisal documents. Shisen still remembered the reversal and disturbance in the black market over these supplement spirit pills, several days before. He colorfully and vividly described everything, from start to finish, that happened these few days in the black market to Heshi, who was listening with interest. Originally, there were some mysterious, fantasy novels that mentioned Miluo Continent's borderless black market online, in her previous life. The person who established the boundless black market was an unknown, almighty person. He opened a fictitious room. All martial artists could link their soul to the black market through the provided jade slips. At the same time, martial artists could engrave products' attributes and information in images to put for sale in this boundless black market. Naturally, for boundless black market to be able to do such business deals, the most important factor was that the creator had a very powerful refining tools expert. They created a sort of mechanism. Its speed was extremely fast. It could travel 1,000 miles in a day, and its protective quality was very high. It was extremely secretive. It could transport purchased and sold items through long distances. Naturally, the pills and magic weapons sold on the black market couldn't be bought at real prices. In addition, boundless black market also had to successfully transport the items, but its secrecy was very strong. It didn't attract much attention. Chapter 4:14 Billionaire Shisen gave Heshi the 2,000 yuan crystals that the replenishing spirit pill was sold at. This already surpassed the price of the top-quality replenishing spirit pill. Naturally, nobody wanted to buy it in the beginning. But, 3 days after the first replenishing spirit pill had been sold, suddenly the rest of the replenishing spirit pills he put up for sale had all been bought. And the black market's interaction page, which had been silent for a few years, suddenly blew up. Wow, crazy. My DD ate 3 of those 2,000 yuan crystal replenishing spirit pills and he directly advanced to foundation establishment stage. Ah. But, I wanted to buy some, but unexpectedly, you can't buy any more. Me too, I bought that high-quality replenishing spirit pill and went to go fight in my sect. In the middle of the battle, I swallowed a replenishing spirit pill and my spiritual power instantly replenished. To my surprise, I even defeated the most powerful senior brother of the outside sect. Wow, from now on, I'm a disciple of the inner sect. In the end, which great person refined this replenishing spirit pill? Ah. So powerful of a spiritual force, such a terrifying amount of essence purity. Unexpectedly, it's only first rank, even chi refining stage martial artists can take it. All the martial artists, that habitually bought medicinal pills off the black market, had gone crazy over these outrageous replenishing spirit pills. How many people had used their mysterious jade slips to link back into the black market's virtual space, just to be able to immediately snatch these pills away? Naturally, Shisan also quickly discovered this grand occasion, therefore, he raised the price of each replenishing spirit pill to 10,000 yuan crystals. But, despite the price being so terrifyingly high, each time more pills were put up for sale, they were immediately sold out. And when the pills Shisan had on hand were all sold away, everyone was wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves on the black market's interaction page. Every day, people would yell, why weren't the top-quality replenishing spirit pills being sold anymore? As she watched as Shisan took out rows of storage rings, the corner of her mouth twitched. These rings were completely filled with the yuan crystals they had earned from their business. Shisan mischievously laughed as he pointed towards the first row of rings. These are the money collected from the flying swords Miss had me sell, as well as the method records. All together, we earned 98,530,000 yuan crystals. Afterwards, he pointed towards the back row of rings. These are from the replenishing spirit pills that Miss gave me. There are also some other yuan crystals gained from selling other pills. Altogether, it's 660 yuan crystals. In other words, she had turned from a poverty-stricken peasant to a billionaire. What was most terrifying was the fact that this was only a third of it. She earned this amount with the pills she had refined out of convenience. Although the magic weapons she handed to Shisan were those that she deemed unable to reach her eyes, but the replenishing spirit pills could be sold for even more than the magic weapons. This was too outrageous. But, when Heshi turned her head to ponder for a moment, she recalled the scene of that group of people who threw out countless yuan crystals to buy the furnace. Immediately after, she felt relieved. In reality, 100 million yuan crystals wasn't much. Especially because she wished to help a group of people promote their cultivation levels. Heshi threw a few storage rings to Shisan, faintly saying, go to pig market to select some slaves. When selecting, pay attention to their behavior, ability to work hard, and endure hardships. Innate skill isn't crucial. The remaining money can be used to employ some subordinates and guards for yourself. Every day, Shisan ran about outside. He was also in contact with many wealthy individuals. Safety needed to be ensured. Shisan was overjoyed. He didn't decline. After taking the ring, he kowtowed to Heshi several times. His face was full of smiles. Have there been any other matters lately? Upon hearing what she said, at once, he replied, indeed, there are two things Miss needs to be informed of. Senior Wu Xan wishes for me to tell Miss, Hell King Manor has received an invitation from Ouyang family. The content of the invitation wishes for His Highness Hell King to pass on this information. They wish to invite you, Miss, to attend Jin Ling's annual hunting competition. Shisan handed Heshi the jade slip. She looked it over it for a moment and her heart rate began to speed up. This year's annual hunting competition had Ouyang Haoshuan's father, Ouyang Zhixiong, overseeing it. Furthermore, the prize was a fourth-rank fire-binding method. Nowadays, what Heshi lacked the most of were high-level attribute cultivation methods. Naturally, this reward was quite tempting to her. She nodded her head and said, tell Wu Xian to inform Ouyang family that I will participate. What was the other matter? From his bosom, Shisan took out another paper and handed it to Heshi. A few days ago there was a magic record that flew into the courtyard. Subordinate doesn't know what this is either. When Heshi looked upon the magic record, she was startled. This was a talisman. Originally, the male who had his wife and children murdered by Feng Lianing gave her a 1,000-mile transmitting talisman to be able to inform her of the time when he found Feng Lianing, so that she could take revenge for him. After leaving, this middle-aged man had given her a few more transmitting talisman. These transmitting talisman were much better compared to Miluo Continent's summoning jade slips. The information it could transmit was much clearer and detailed. Therefore, at the time, Heshi had given Gu Lu Feng, Nan Gong Yu, and Wu Yu a few. Then, why would there be a transmitting talisman that flew into the courtyard? Has she used spiritual force to ignite the transmitting talisman and immediately heard Zhou Yan'an's hoarse voice, which was filled with despair. Sorry, Shi Gongzi. Originally, we agreed for you to come to Xingde Hall to treat someone, 1 month later. You need not come anymore. No. By all means, you must not come. Must not come by all means. Heshi's eyebrows pursued, why would Zhou Yan'an request this? What happened? Zhou Yan'an didn't wish for her to go look, as expected, Heshi must go take a look. Early in the morning, on the second day, Heshi had already left the courtyard, early on, to head towards Yanjing City. Before entering Yanjing City, she changed herself into an ordinary youngster. Before she walked onto the East Street, Heshi heard the sounds of a racket, the sounds of screaming voices. Today Ji Sheng Hall opened for business again, in order to express gratitude to everyone. Anyone who purchases pills from my medicine hall will also receive a free inspection from Dr. Gu. The people in the crowd let out enthusiastic cheers, surrounding Ji Sheng Hall in an impenetrable crowd. Although that Dr. Gu was merely a first-rank doctor, but doctors were uncommon and arrogant. Examining people, free of charge today, this was a good matter that couldn't be requested of. Heshi looked at the lively scene in front of her, then looked towards Ji Sheng Hall's tightly closed doors. It gave a cold and deserted feeling. She deeply pursued her eyebrows. She lightly knocked on the door, there weren't any noises coming from inside and nobody came to answer. Then, she suddenly heard a little manservant's cordial voice. This Gongzi, do you wish to buy medicinal pills? Would it be better to come inside Ji Sheng Hall to take a look? We've just received large quantities of medicinal pills, we have whatever attribute or type you have. When Heshi turned her head, she saw someone coming over and was startled. She recognized this little manservant, he once ran errands inside Xingde Hall. But now, this person ran to Xingji Hall to be a manservant. What happened during this month? What about Zhou Yan'an and Gu Lufeng? Chapter 416 Xingde Hall is bankrupt. Heshi muttered to herself for a moment, then she suddenly took a crystal stone out of her bosom and waved it in front of the little manservant. Tell me what happened in Xingde Hall and this crystal stone is yours. If what you tell me is very detailed, I'll give you an even larger reward. When the little manservant saw the crystal stone, his eyes brightened. At once, he lowered his voice and narrated what happened, from start to finish. Originally, 1 month before, the matters regarding sealed dragon domain's secret territory hadn't been settled for long, when suddenly, rumors spread across the capital about Gu Lufeng. Some said that Xingde Hall's master, Gu Lufeng, was actually Murong family's bias, Murong Lufeng. Some people also said that, in sealed dragon domain's secret territory, this Murong Lufeng was unfilial. Unexpectedly, he used crafty plots and machinations to murder Murong family's elder and head of the household. Because of this information, people in Yanjing City were criticizing Xingde Hall. Xingde Hall, that was originally charitable and prestigious in the people's eyes, suffered under people's boycotting. Adding on to this fact was that during this period of time, the medicinal ingredients and pills they could obtain became less and less. This also caused their business to slowly become bleaker and bleaker. The little manservant sighed, at that time, I was also Xingde Hall's manservant. The circumstances in the shop were so terrible, it spoiled shopkeeper Zhou. But, one didn't expect that even worse things were yet to come. A few days prior, there was suddenly a group of people who charged into Xingde Hall, wanting to take away our master. This group of people called themselves Murong family's people, they came over to clean up the door. At first, the master also fought with this group of people. Xingde Hall was smashed into pieces, nearly drawing the guards over. But suddenly, the fighting stopped. Master didn't retaliate, even a little bit, and was beat senseless by this group of people. Afterward, they even took master away. A sad expression appeared on the little manservant's face. Shopkeeper and master were both very good to us. If it was possible, we wouldn't want to leave. But, master is gone, naturally, Xingde Hall can't continue running. Actually, the massacre of Ji Xing Hall, from 1 month previous, has yet to be forgotten. Didn't expect that it started again now, infecting elsewhere. I also need to support my family, so, He threw 2 crystal stones to the little manservant, sending him away. Then, she stood in the doorway of Xingde Hall, contemplating. Suddenly, she sensed a faint breath on the 2nd floor. This breath was very hidden. If it weren't for He's meticulous searching, she wouldn't be able to find anything. He's eyes concentrated and her figure suddenly flashed, jumping onto Xingde Hall's 2nd floor. The 2nd floor's sliding window seemed to have been smashed, half open in the air. As the wind was blowing over, a creaking and crunching sound was heard. Just when He jumped through the window, she felt an icy sword's qi hitting her in the face. This sword's qi wasn't very great, but it was filled with the intent of ending in mutual destruction. Furthermore, the might wasn't small, it scared He a bit. Fortunately, the purple abyss vine in her hands reacted quickly. Immediately, it flew out, blocking this strike. Naturally, the purple abyss vine was very angry that He was being attacked. Screaming, it wanted to go and tear the person, attacking He, into pieces and suck the person clean. But, He's left hand merely beckoned and pulled the purple abyss vine back. Her eyes were attentively staring at the person hidden in a secret place, saying, "Zhou Yenan, come out." From the darkness, a faintly shivering body slowly walked out. His hands still held onto the flying sword, his eyes were red as he stared at He. With a fighting attitude he said, "Young master has already been taken away by you guys, what are you guys coming to do? Where is young master? What did you do to him?" Chapter 4:17 In the end, what happened? He slightly frowned, she used her hand to wipe her face and take off her disguise. Lowering her voice, "Zhou Yenan, clearly look at who I am. Shi Gongzi." There was the sound of something clattering and the flying sword fell to the ground. Zhou Yenan seemed to be like a deflated ball. His 2 knees were soft, falling to the floor. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something and his face had a bit of alarm on it. He repeatedly said, "Shi Gongzi, no. Genius Dr. Shi, you quickly leave, don't come here again." Before young master left, he said to tell you to no longer speak to him. He doesn't want you to be implicated alongside him. That agreement is dropped, Shi Gongzi, quickly leave. On the contrary, He didn't leave. Instead, she began to speak in a cold tone. "You joke, you let me come and I'll come. Let me leave and I'll leave. I, Shiyu, will always keep my word on the things I've agreed to. I disdain not returning kindness even more. Speak, what happened to Gu Lufeng?" In a daze, Zhou Yenan looked at He. The youth in front of him had handsome eyebrows and phoenix eyes. His skin was like jade, clearly he looked like a weak youth. Clearly he was no more than foundation establishment stage. But, he always emitted an imposing manner. It seemed as if, no matter how big a plight it was, he could settle it. It seemed like, no matter how challenging or dangerous something was, as long as he was there, they would be able to overcome any difficulties. Zhou Yenan thought of what happened inside Sealed Dragon Domain's secret territory. When confronting the formidable Ice Lotus Fairy, he, as a gold core stage martial artist, could only give up all hope and wait to die. But, he would try his best when fighting the Ice Lotus Fairy, even going as far as to injure her. If it was this youth's words, perhaps there's still a chance for young master to be saved. A rush of hope bubbled forth in Zhou Yenan's heart. He knew very well that this kind of mood was preposterous, but he couldn't help but want to continue to believe in and pray for this mere foundation establishment stage youth. After exiting the secret territory, it was very hard on our Xingde Hall. Not only was it Murong family, there's also a large power, in the back, that's also suppressing us. Inside Yanjing City, there are many people who spoke of the news of young master. Our means of replenishing stock also became an issue. The medicinal hall's business took a devastating decline. At the time, young master seemed to already have a premonition. He even said, if something happened to him, I should send a letter to Shigongzi, telling you not to come here at all costs. What young master didn't want to happen was to include you. Heshi frowned and replied, as far as I know, Murong family only has one high-level gold core stage martial artist. It was Murong Hai, who died in the secret territory. The remaining people, even if there was a gold core stage, they wouldn't be Gu Liufeng's opponent. If Gu Lufeng had the thought to run, how could there be someone who took him away? Zhou Yan'an tearfully wiped at his face. In the beginning, young master beat the people who come into a sorry state. But afterwards, one person among them was the surrogate head of the household for Murong family, Murong Feng. He took out a jade slip to give to young master to see. After young master saw the jade slip, his complexion changed. Then, that Murong Feng also said that if young master didn't follow him back, he would announce the contents of the jade slip to everyone. This caused young master to not have the face to keep living anymore. Afterwards, young master gave up resisting and allowed those people to take him away. Heshi frowned. What was inside the jade slip? I don't know either, but it must be something that young master wouldn't want others to know, even if he died. Zhou Yan'an recalled young master's appearance when he was leaving. It was full of despair. He couldn't help but feel a burst of chilliness in his heart. His voice began to shudder. Shigongzi, you. Do you have methods to save young master? Young master has already suffered under their hands for a few days now. This group of beasts, I really don't know how they'll torture young master. If I could, I would want to rush up and fight with them, but I'm too weak. I'm a gold core stage martial artist, but I don't know any magical techniques. Shigongzi. I'm begging you. I'm begging you to save young master. Darkness is falling, there are a sea of stars. The entirety of Yanjing City was enveloped in a tranquil, hazy ambience. Heshi lowered the spiritual power in her body and changed to Qinggong. Her whole body resembled a swallow as she traversed across Yanjing City's streets. Yanjing City prevented flying and fighting inside the city. If a martial artist used spiritual power to fly, the Imperial City's large-scale spiritual restriction barrier would discover them and the martial artist would also receive a severe punishment. But Heshi's Qinggong couldn't be detected by any spiritual restriction barrier. She soared high in the air while using the divine knowledge to try and figure out what the information on Murong family was on the jade slip. After looking through all the information, Heshi pursued her brows. Her face let out a confused expression. Suddenly, a small golden dragon's head poked out from her collar and softly said in her ears, Lauda, what's up? Is it that this Murong manor is very hard to deal with? How about we call upon Wu Xian, that little fellow? Currently, Wu Xian was still in Sung Mountain. Although he wasn't inside Sealed Dragon Domain's secret territory, he was somewhere near it. The spiritual qi there was very advantageous towards cultivators. Coupled with high interest, you could see Sung Mountain's entire circumstances at a glance. Therefore, as long as anyone entered Sung Mountain, Wu Xian would become aware. Of course, if Heshi encountered any danger on her part, the mind brand that Wu Xian left on her would stir up. He would then immediately rush over and help her. Heshi shook her head and softly replied, it's exactly the opposite. From these resources, this Murong manor is possibly weak. But, I'm not sure why. In spite of everything, they're able to become one of the 4 biggest families in Yanjing City. One had to understand that Yanjing City's 4 biggest families, most has their own characteristics. Each has their own respective domain. For example, Naylan Manor's Naylan Zheng's medical expertise level was the highest in Jinling Kingdom. He was a high-level doctor in the imperial family and he was also a member in the Doctor Association. Most of all, the 9 unequal wrongs pill in his hands was the pill everyone in the cultivation world wanted. Currently, Ouyang family was in Ouyang Zhixiong's control, passed under direct blood descendants, the talented persons in the collateral family withered. It was nearly 10 years and there weren't any high-level martial artists. But, for many generations, Ouyang family held on to 100,000 soldiers. They had Jinling Kingdom's royal family's deep trust as well as Ouyang Haoshuan's outstanding aptitude. Therefore, their position as one of the biggest families was steady. After nearly 10 years, Huangfu family finally raised a powerful person. In a short while, the clans suddenly had 5 high-level martial artists. Moreover, Huangfu's main elder seemed to be about to advance to nascent soul stage. With this sort of peak strength, it caused Huangfu family to jump to one of the 4 best families. Rather than running neck and neck with the other 3 major families, it seemed to have power that slightly surpassed the other 3. But only this Murong family caused Heshi to become extremely puzzled. Although Murong Manor also had business in medicine, there were also experts inside the clan who were able to refine pills. But their levels couldn't even match up to Nailinjing's. And Murong family's gold core expert paled so much in comparison, it was pitiful. Only, the 2 gold core stages clan head and elder died in sealed dragon domain. But even like this, it didn't budge Murong family's position as one of the most powerful families. Who was Murong family relying on? By the time Heshi arrived at Murong Manor, darkness had already fully settled. In one leap, Heshi jumped to the highest roof. Just as she was about to come down and explore, she felt her heart tremble. She forgot to breathe and let Dan conceal any motion of her spiritual power before she cautiously began to explore. Murong Manor's layout was similar to a Sihiyuan one in her previous life. They used tall perimeters to surround everything, and on the wall, they had drawn many restrictions. Anyone with spiritual power who entered would stir up the restriction. Inside the manor, there were patrolling guards everywhere. Every 3 steps was a whistle and every 5 was a post. This small Murong manor was guarded with an iron fist. The little golden dragon couldn't resist using the divine knowledge to say in Heshi's mind, not sure how much shady business this Murong manor has hidden away. Ben Zun has seen the guards in the imperial palace before, they weren't as tight to this degree. In the end, he still hasn't forgot to lick Heshi's boots. Fortunately, Lauda has amazing skills, not a cultivated body nor a cultivated spirit. When pushing through this method, you didn't even touch the barrier. That awesome ability is from your blood, next time call on me, okay? But, Heshi had no time to pay attention to the little golden dragon's chatter, her gaze was firmly glued on a nearby courtyard and her expression was grave. All she saw was a cloaked male, on top of the eaves of that courtyard, speaking to a middle-aged man. This cloaked person's breath was barely sensible and his spiritual power didn't have any movements. But, by instinct, Heshi was tense from head to toe, a little bit of cold sweat seeped out of her palms. This cloaked person's strength wasn't simple. He was, at least, several times stronger than Elder Jiang. Although Heshi hadn't seen this middle-aged man before, she could tell by his style of clothing that he was someone from Murong Manor. Moreover, his status was definitely high. But at this moment, the middle-aged man had a respectful and fearful appearance when speaking to the cloaked man. Even his eyes were facing the floor, not daring to randomly look around. Heshi poured her internal power into her ears and began to listen in on the 2 people's conversation. Reporting to Superior, all the pills have been refined. Requesting you to check over them. Whilst speaking, the middle-aged man took out a storage bag and respectfully handed it over to the cloaked man. The cloaked man held the storage bag and quickly checked it over. Then, he replied, pleased, very good. I'll definitely pay back Elder Murong for his contributions. When that time comes, there will definitely be many benefits for you. As long as Murong family properly handles affairs for us, there will be a day when the head of the 4 biggest families will be you. The cloaked man's voice was hoarse and gloomy, but it sounded vague and fuzzy. Clearly, he had altered his voice. When the middle-aged man heard this, he was overjoyed with good news. Superior Xia, my Murong family developing into how it is today, we definitely won't forget Superior Xia's support and kindness. The cloaked man satisfyingly nodded his hand and put the storage bag away. Then, he threw another storage bag to him. This is the second half of the year's material. Properly store this away, you must deliver these goods on time. The cloaked man's words hadn't finished yet before his expression suddenly turned cold. Suddenly, he turned his head and looked in Heshi's direction. At once, the middle-aged man nervously asked, "Superior, what's wrong?" "It's nothing." The cloaked man confusedly shook his head and immediately mumbled, "Don't tell me it was my imagination." "It must be my imagination. If there was someone, how can they escape from my divine knowledge's examining?" Soon after, the cloaked man and middle-aged man left together. Heshi, who was concealed on the rooftop, finally let out a loose breath. Immediately after, she unhappily swat the little golden dragon's head. 1. Sihiyuan, it's a historical residence found mainly in China. The Wikipedia page has more information if you're interested. The little golden dragon knew he was wrong and his horn drooped down. "Lauda, I was wrong. I didn't expect that all-black person to be so great, I only spit out a breath. Fortunately, Lauda was quick to react and threw me into your space." Heshi coldly snorted and didn't pay attention to it. She made sure the cloaked man was far away before jumping off the roof. Now, the most important thing was to find who was controlling everything and have him lead her to where Gu Lufeng was imprisoned. In the cold and gloomy underground dungeon a scarlet flame was burning. 3 guards wearing black clothes were currently adding more coal to the fire and placing an iron stove above it. Following the fire burning more and more, the iron stove let out zzz sounds. In this dark environment, just hearing these noises would turn your scalp numb. Murong Manor's prisoner interrogation room wasn't big, nor did it have a bloody smell. But, there were shackles, whips, and poison stingers on the wall. The entire prisoner room only had one captive who seemed to be no more than 20 years old. All 4 limbs of the youth's body were firmly shackled to shelves by black chains. So much so that even his neck, wrist, and ankles had something similar twisted around them. Their entire person was rigidly stuck to the wall, unable to move even an inch. The youth's face carried a strange, white mask. His clothes were disheveled, exposing a bruised and scar-riddled body. But, this youth's body was excellent. The youth had broad shoulders, narrow buttocks, and fair skin. With the added scars on his body, he didn't seem to be a sorry figure. Instead, he looked even more sensational. The guard, who was roasting a flat iron in the fire, looked at the chained-up youth several times. In the end, he couldn't help but remark, "This 6th young master is truly very unyielding. He had been tortured for several days and still hasn't uttered a word." "What 6th young master?" Another guard disdainfully replied, "He's nothing more than a scoundrel who shamelessly betrayed Murong family." "What young master? He'll soon turn into a lunatic, just like that mother of his. I've heard this Murong Lufeng has the cultivation of a gold core summit stage. I didn't expect he would be so easily taken into our Murong family, zeze. Looking at his pitiful and miserable appearance, he doesn't look like a gold core stage at all, he may as well be a normal person." Together, the 3 guards laughed. They were just about to say another round of insults to the prisoner when suddenly, heavy footsteps sounded from the doorway. The prison door was quickly opened and a tall figure appeared in the doorway. "All of you get out, guard the doorway. I have some words I want to say to my 6th D, alone." The youth that appeared in the doorway looked to be about 27 or 28 years old. His appearance could be said to be handsome and bright, but his eyes were slightly picked up, his nose was curved, and his eyes were flickering. His entire aura seemed to be someone who did good deeds in secret. When the three guards see the young man, their eyes all held fear in them and they simultaneously greeted him, "Third young master." The person who arrived was Murong Lin Feng, the unsurpassed in talent and rarely seen third generation. At such a young age he was already at the summit of Meridian stage. But, when compared to Gu Lu Feng, his advancement speed wasn't anything to look at. Murong Lin Feng looked at the three guards who were looking at each other in dismay. Immediately, his expression turned cold. The spiritual power in his hands suddenly rolled and the whip that was boiling in the iron stove suddenly appeared in his hand. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.